and that fits with your threat model, that's okay. My argument would be, though, these organizations are still putting users at risk every single day with older clients and don't seem to care about that. If you want a VPN for yourself and you're slightly techie, check out Algo VPN or Streisand VPN. They're excellent. I don't have a lot of advice in terms of the consumer space for services. One thing I would say is if you look at the reviews, scroll to the bottom of these things, because Torrent Freak, PC Magazine, Network World, if you look at the bottom, in small letters it says, many of these products are sponsors of this media outlet. So, if there's not a lot of great information sources out there for people that want sort of objective, unbiased information. There's a thing called I think his handle is something like the Privacy Guy. It's like a giant spreadsheet, that's a Google Doc spreadsheet that's floating around. Has, I don't know, 60 or 80 different VPN providers. What I would say about that is those are all self-report. So if you ask people, do we log? No, we don't log. Have you ever worked with, have you ever gotten any NSLs or any other, intercept requests or government? No, not at all. You're totally cool with us. And people do that. They trust their data. I should mention too, by the way, not only is it not unheard of, it's fairly common that the configuration is so borked that some of the cheaper ones dual home you, so that you're not just connecting there so that you can sort of get through the captive Wi-Fi at the airport or whatever. You're also connecting to your local network, bridging. Awesome. So you're sharing it with who knows how many different people who can totally see your your inside interface. That's just extraordinary to me, but anyway, that wasn't so brief. So on to a couple other pieces. So disk and volume encryption. I think people know about BitLocker and FileVault and Decrypt. Turn them on everywhere. There are really decent GPO policies on Windows that let you manage that if you're not already doing it. It can be a multi-million-dollar problem if you have a device like a laptop that is that's lost, that has PII on it. If the disk is encrypted, it's not even reportable. So, but there are different reasons too. So, but let's talk about servers or cloud servers, for example. Why do you care about this? If you can't control the logical sort of sequence of things with the media, right? So there are cases. I don't know if you know this. This guy Marco Amat, he was he was sort of the creator of Instapaper. He had some of his servers seized, not because of anything he did, but because there were other people doing goofy stuff like in the same rack. And so his service provider basically told him one day, he's like, yeah, we had to take your machine because the feds came and took it. It just got swept up. It had nothing to do with him. Who had that chain? I mean, he was sort of a third party at that point, so I'm not sure how that was ever resolved. But there is an issue for civil capture, for potential government capture, but also just mundane things like e-discovery, right? You want to be able to be in a position where if your service provider is subpoenaed, if your architecture permits it, that shouldn't be, that should be transparent to you. You should be able to see that. Most cloud providers are in a co-tenant model, right? I mean, this is certainly true for Amazon and Google. By default now, you don't have to worry so much about physical loss, like when disks die and they go to wherever. You don't have to worry about it in the sense of Google has attested, Amazon has attested to the defense intelligence groups and the federal government, and has had third-party audits that were signed by executives under threat of violating the law. That no, they have a very strict handling process for either repurposing or disposal. The nightmare scenario is sort of the mom and pop or smallish regional either cloud provider or hosting provider that's managing something, and that it dies, it gets tossed, or a raid dies and some of the disks survive and then they end up on eBay or Craigslist. It's an issue if you've got sensitive data. Content repudiation, I don't think that's as big a deal, but there are people working in kind of polarized environments, activists and so forth, that want to be able to have architectures in place where they can say, no, that data is not mine. It can't be, it can't be attributed to me. That's, and there are digital identities that go with that. The data at rest compliance is said too. If you think of compliance as its own sort of threat or adversary, this is why you can use these things. So I don't know how many people know about live VM motion, live motion. This is a really cool thing on VMware where you don't have to reboot a server. While it's live running, you can transport the load to another machine. So it's literally doing memory deltas, it's doing CPU deltas, it's doing disk deltas, which is awesome from an ops perspective. But if you think about that, and Google also offers that now too, for the Google Compute platform, and I'm a huge fan of GCP. I think they have some tremendous services and products. But if you think about that, so I'm running a process here, maybe it's a web server, it's some other kind of endpoint or database, and it's got interesting information on it. They're able to live transport that entire stack, memory, CPU, working processes, everything, to a different rack, potentially to a different data center. Okay. There's another play there that's involved that might not have been considered as part of your threat model. If you use Oracle or a SQL Server, there's variants of transparent data encryption, partially or properly preserving encryption and so forth. Those are more at a very specific kind of application level, but they address things like a black box custodian. So, for example, you can have very fine-grained silos for access controls so that even an administrator, in theory, wouldn't be able to see the contents of a system, or in the other case, a rogue or a weak admin. Hardware security models, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. Happy to talk to folks later, but the key piece here is that there is usually a physical hardened kind of appliance, often runs Linux or some other kind of lightweight operating system. There's key generation. There are true random number generators, pseudo-random number generators. You can use it for tokens, and it basically addresses. Sorry, one sec. Oh.
Did you lose video?
Yeah. Does anyone have a Mac PowerBook adapter? Old school? Let me see.
Like the right shape and not
Yeah, it's the next big one up. Yeah. I can do shadow puppets or something. No, thanks.
Just shove it in there and
No, I thought my screensaver went, and then I realized my phone was tethering, but it also was pulling down the whole battery.
it's not the right one. Oh yeah.
It's got to be an 80 watt, I think.
Yeah, I've got an 80.
Do you? Okay, perfect. Thanks.
Yeah, great.
That's one of the like bulldoze.
Enough Mac people around.
Oh, I appreciate it. No, I think we're good. Yeah. Sorry about that.
They drain back.
Sorry. We're almost wrapped up. By the way, I have a couple big posters if people have some questions afterwards that might be useful, or you can throw darts at. I'm not sure. Can somebody grab this down there? Can I get a volunteer? Thanks. Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it. Yeah, sorry about that.
So Ken, while that's booting, can I ask a question?
Sure, please.
You mentioned SSH.
Right.
Using 2FA with SSH. Are you a fan of YubiKey or?
Love YubiKey.
Okay.
Love it.
everybody know what Unity is? No? Some yeses. Google Unity. I'm the worst.
Oh. Oops. That's not a message you want to see, is it? %. It died at 19%. Come on. There we go. Tricky thing is, does this work backwards, do you know? I love Apple engineering. That's the only reason I wouldn't consider a new Mac Pro that doesn't have the MagSafe.
You want me to try one of the ones that don't have the adapter?
No, I think we're good. Oh.
So don't you usually consider one as what?
The new MacBooks have USB-C, so it doesn't have the mag thing.
But you get to buy more dongles.
I got one USB-C. It's job creation. It's dongle purchase. It's job creation.
And I know we just got a few minutes to jump in if other folks have questions. Okay, so yeah, so that's enough about that. So memory encryption. I don't know if people have seen Tessor, T-E-S-O-R. It's one of the coolest projects I've ever seen. So the Intel and AMD modern processors are so big that the L2 caches are enough that you can actually do encryption in cache. So you can encrypt all of RAM and do real-time decryption in the L2 cache. So that if somebody even did a live pull down of like raw memory in the case of a KVM or Zen, Dev KMEM, right? You pull it down, they get garbage. How cool is that? So Tresor actually was specific for the keys for de-encrypt. There was another group that I think Facebook bought them about 2 years ago. But anyway, that's what they did. They did live memory encryption in use. I've heard that Facebook is open sourcing that pretty soon, but I'm not sure. This specifically also addresses, and I've seen this for a couple architectures, for that live VMware migration, where either for regulatory reasons or maybe sort of anti-competitive or trade secret or intellectual property. I hate that phrase, but anyway, for those sorts of reasons, you may want to have mitigations for live migration, and so memory encryption is one of those possibilities. So putting it all together, so these are kind of the top high-level things. I don't know if you know his work. Ange Bertolini is sort of the guru of polymorphic file types. So do you guys know this journal, Proof of Concept, or GTFO? Oh, if not, you have to check it out. So they have all these interesting, unusual hacks and things. Anyway, Ange is one of the people that worked with the SHA-1 break team to do PDF collision for SHA-1, so that you have two different documents, but they share the same. He's also sort of infamous for having a file which is both a PDF and a legitimate HTML file and a legitimate JavaScript and a legitimate GIF. But anyway, he helped with the graphics design on this and came up with a couple other sort of things. This is sort of a mind map, which kind of represents a lot of the stuff we've been talking about, and he kind of went crazy with it too. This is like the high-tech sort of circuit board model. And like I said, Ange is just he's out there. So the file I've got, which is a legitimate PDF, there's also a GIF version, but you can do this. So you can say script source equals mymat.gift or script source equals mymat.js. It's the same file, just change the extension so the hashes are the same. But it's a polymorph, right? Or a polyglot, I should say. So if you download the GIF version of this, you can also, it'll do a pop-up box that says hello. It's nothing dangerous, but anyway, I thought that was kind of cool. Quickly, some other interesting work to take a look at. I love this slide, formal software verification. Amazon, Microsoft, Apple, and Google are all spending significant amounts of money doing refactoring of their TLS stack. If you haven't followed, Amazon has something called S2N, for I think it's signal to noise is what it stands for. But they've replaced OpenSSL as the wrapper for libcrypto. And I think they've cut the size of it down to maybe a tenth of what it was. But they brought in people who do formal software methods, formal verification methods, like mathematical analysis of the security guarantees and properties, as have Google with boring SSL, as has Microsoft with their next generation TLS stack. So there are some really interesting developments that way. And it's not just like an R&D project. I mean, in the case of Amazon, they've rolled it out globally, and Google has as well with the boring SSL stuff that they're doing. There's also, I think I've got a link at the bottom. Have you guys heard of the DARPA challenge with the trusted software? So the headline was sort of goofy and a little misleading. Basically, the headline came out, unhackable drone. The real story behind that was these DARPA awards. There was a team that spent about a year and a half, and from the ground up, they wrote in a memory-safe language, formally verifying the security properties, a flight control system, the operating system itself, the file interfaces, the GPS, the remote controls, the lift, I mean everything. And formally verified this entire, it's a toy drone, it's like this big, top to bottom. And so it's not really to say that it's unhackable, but it's 99% less surface area than traditional software projects of that complexity, with memory-safe languages, with complete analysis of the protocol, including the key exchanges and the handshakes and things. That's pretty awesome. Obviously, it costs a fair amount of money and lots of time, but there are some interesting things in that regard. And so, but that's my point, is that Google, Amazon, Microsoft, and Apple as well, their own internal products, they're going through these same kind of practices. Just a couple of parting thoughts. I'm happy to talk all day about crypto, but a lot of what we do comes back to first principles, right? Security, hygiene, trusted supply chain, the root of trust. One of the CISOs from Microsoft, John Lambert, had this a little while back, and I thought this was great. 98% of the threats they're seeing in the Microsoft Global Threat Center are macros. I think some of us sort of know that, like, it's fun to talk about nation-state stuff. It's fun to talk about the WikiLeaks hacks and all that kind of, but this is the boring reality of the world. There are all kinds of GPO policies and things that can be put in place. I'm not a Windows guy, so that's sort of the extent of what I've seen, but there are some interesting things that way also. And I don't know if people are broadly aware of Nano or Core. So in the new generation of Azure, Microsoft Azure, the cloud platform, they've launched Nano, which is, I think it's like a couple hundred megs, but it's a GUI-free, highly minimized version of Windows Server with all the the Linux subsystem things built in as well. So anyway, maybe worth a look. And I guess one of the other things I would say is just remember your threat model. Are you defending against this or this? Or are you defending against the woe signs of the world? This is one of the biggest takeaways too, I hope, which is your operating system out of the box already has a deep chain of trust, which you may not even be aware of. And applications like Chrome sometimes can ignore those and use their own set of roots of trust. Applications all the time have their own trust stores with CAs embedded as well. You may have on one system literally dozens of different certificate authority stores which may never get updated. As I said, relationship with these intermediaries are complicated, but people are starting to do some smarter things too. Like I said, pulling some of the ones that are less relevant for your particular use case. I saw this other thing too, which I thought was interesting. It's a small little UI technique or tactic, but I thought this was really neat. So why don't a lot of other online systems have something like this, where it's not an open-ended, my Pinterest is, is okay to use Twitter or whatever, but no, with explicit timeouts. Little things like this are going to make, I think, a huge impact. We see also there's a technology called Thinkst with canaries. Are people familiar with this? This is like one of the. I feel like it's an insider secret that more people should know about. It's a pretty simple concept. It's a small little box. You drop it on your network, and basically it listens for scans. If in a segment of your network there's no legitimate reason for you to ever be scanned, to have an SNMP or a port sweep for Oracle's listener or SQLD, MySQLD or whatever, if it sees that, it chirps like a canary through messages or push notifications or whatever. But the other thing that they've got, which is kind of neat, is they've got dummy documents in FTP that are Word, Excel, I think PDF too. So maybe folks are aware of this. I wasn't until fairly recently. There are beacons that you can put in those documents that just looking at them calls home. And so there's a whole infrastructure they've set up where you can put particular things in place, which basically it's like wire of sorts, where there's no reason that these should be scrutinized or opened or looked at. There's no legitimate use, and so when they are, it's likely there's some kind of intrusion or otherwise maybe it's an authorized scan. Things like that. They're inexpensive, they're not complicated, they're kind of first principle things, will outdo some of these $200,000 Blinky boxes in many cases. As I said, blacklists, whitelists, these things are crucial. If you guys have ever seen the movie Apollo 13, this is one of my favorite lines when things went really bad. So that's a little bigger version of that. And this is how adversaries work, right? Don't care how you think your network diagram looks. You don't care how your handshake protocol should look. Maybe I'm going to send 8 gigs worth of JavaScript probes to go enumerate a script tag, because once I've got that, it's basically a Caesar cipher for the rest of your payload. If a lot of this seems like it's outside your lane, it's, you sort of recognize some of the terms and phrases, but it doesn't, it's not really your area. This is how people who work in this all the time, I go to crypto meetings, and there are people that are like, I'm not an academic crypto guy. Other people are like, I don't do protocol analysis. Other people are like, I'm not an implementer. People are like, no, I don't do S-table stuff. If there are imposter syndrome that I see by some of the best in the field, then it's okay to recognize, there are things that don't make sense. It's that collection of these different areas. Your black box is what someone else does all the time. When the whole Apple iPhone thing came out, I thought this was a great thing from Matt Blaze. If you followed this Confide messaging app story the last few days, it just got ripped apart when it actually was got peer-reviewed by people in the security engineering world for a whole lot of reasons. But one of them came down to, it's like Telegram. It's what I call pinky promise as a service. We promise not to do bad things, but we could, versus signals protocol analysis, which is, it doesn't matter who the intermediary is. It doesn't matter who's in the middle. It's not a policy promise. It's a technical constraint. So as you look at solutions, sometimes you have to make policy. You have to sort of adhere to policy or accept those limitations. But if ever possible, it should be technical limits. And I'll leave it with that. Open up for questions, too, if folks want to.
Question. What do you think about FIPS 140?
About what?
Do you have any thoughts about FIPS 140?
Yeah, it's one of the. So the question is about FIPS 140. My thoughts. It's one of the most misunderstood things. FIPS isn't about security. FIPS 142 is about correct implementation of very narrow questions. are keys managed in a particular way? Are ciphers and MACs and hashes computed in a certain way? Do they comport with test suites? There have been a graveyard of FIPS 142 products that were just completely owned. But that's not what it's trying to address. What it's trying to address is you sort of crypto created by your cousin, right? It's trying to address were the primitives constructed properly. Where there is a big problem with FIPS is in the federal world, where it sort of limits what it limits what we can do as new attacks are seen and new problems are recognized, because it's got such a slow timeline to for revalidation. I think it has a useful purpose, but I think it's been net pretty questionable for global security, frankly, because a lot of people in this room may not care what the federal government standards or certifications are, but Fortune 500s do, and the defense world does, and what trickles down there goes into all kinds of things, including consumer products. So I think it's good that there's a group of experts and third party that can attest to the way that certain primitive constructions are done. I think it's really bad that a lot of people distill all that down to, well, FIPS 142, it's got the stamp, so it must be secure. Or we can't touch it because it's FIPS 142. It's the human element, right? Anybody else? I've got 2 posters. All right.
Smart question. Get a poster.
And I'll leave these, the links up too on the back of the page too. And this is how to reach me. All right. I appreciate it. Oh, one last one.
So what's the next great project for the open crypto audit? So, right, first you guys did walls, crypt. Next it was libSSL.
Oh, OpenSSL. Right. Right.
What's the next big thing?
I'm not sure. There are things that weren't specific to us, but sort of in the community that we run with. So there are people who've helped OCAP and who are advisors who've worked with the Linux Foundation and some other groups. Google's actually pouring, to their credit, a lot of resources into things like verifiable crypto, alternative, smaller, newer libraries. One quick thing, so I don't know how many people are familiar with Go as a language. The short version is some of the people who created it came from AT&T Labs that did C originally. It's basically maintained by Google. It's an open source project. I think it's been around for like 8 or 9 years now. I mention it because it's used by Cloudflare and Netflix and Amazon and large parts of banking increasingly so. And one of the interesting things they did was they completely rewrote the TLS stack, and they rewrote the certificate parsing. So I didn't have pictures of it, but there are myriad ways that you can have a web certificate, and they are actually recursive. And there's all these weird, goofy, like rarely understood and rarely implemented options. So you can say, I'm foo, but I trust bar. Bar trusts Baz. Baz trusts Bip. Bip trusts foo. And get these like weird recursions. You can also, and also the encoding, the way that the letters and numbers are represented is so complicated and overly, it's like a Rube Goldberg thing. There's been a whole series of things. If you're interested, you can search for frankencerts. One of the things we did with OpenSSL, by the way, is we looked at over 2 million certs in the field that were either kind of weird or otherwise kind of constructed strangely. But this gets to what are some of the other big things. I have nothing to do with Go, but you're seeing things like Go with an ASN parser that's 200 lines of code versus thousands and thousands of C with Perl generated assembly, which is complicated. So I mean, I think there's an appreciation by a lot of organizations in terms of memory safe systems, modern languages, SQL injection, and XSS by default. You can't do in Go. You have to like go out of your way. Same with Rust. You have to go like really bend over backwards to make that possible because of the way the the core standard libraries are written. So I think there are some promising things like that. That stuff with DARPA, with the drone, there's going to be a lot more of that on the horizon. Mudge with his CyberCL Labs, I don't know if folks have followed that project, but it's basically kind of it's like a consumer reports version of like a cyber assessment, like a minimum baseline, basically. It's meant to address things like 1.4 million webcams running around the world on the internet with full remote root, baby cams, this kind of stuff. So I think over time there's going to be more of that, and it's going to start in the federal world. And it's going to start in the defense world. These are things that are going to be required, like as baselines going forward, and I think it's going to benefit all of us. All right, thanks.
Joe Gray.
Sure, thank you.
I know the students, some of it will just take their own advice, but I think particularly the students here, if you think of a question that you want to ask him. So next up we have Joe Gray, and he's going to tell us about OSINT. And I'm sure he'll probably break down the acronym for you. We're lucky to have Joe here. He's a SANS instructor for the 504 hacker techniques, exploits, and what's that one? Incident response, incident handling. Believe it or not, I actually took that class a few years ago. I just couldn't remember what it was called. Not with Joe, but I'm sure he would have rocked it. Joe also has a really cool podcast, Advanced Persistent Security. So if you want to add a podcast to your playlist.
Well, he's going to ask me to turn the volume up, but I can't. This doesn't actually work here, so never mind.
Okay, so we're running a little behind, but bear with us. If you need to stand up and stretch, though, please do. And take it away, Joe. Thank you for coming. Don't record my shoddy intro.
I did. Start before I took it away.
I've got a dongle here for HDMI, but we're going male to male on this.
Yeah, we can't do HDMI. I'm going to do VGA.
Yeah, I've got a dongle here, but it's going male to male. Don't have that one.
Oh, did the lender of the
All right.
Just coming up to
Yeah, I don't even have VGA, but I can go HDMI to VGA.
He might have grabbed it.
All right, let me find a gender bender.
Okay. Worst case scenario, I can put the computer right here and just speak off of it.
So this and this. Just put it in. assuming you have used this one before, right?
Yes. I just gotta move it over. Tested this yesterday, so it should work. Let me try unplugging the HDMI in.
Do it? Here, try mine.
Okay.
Are you sure that's not a VGA 2?
Could be.
The ends is a little weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a VGA 2.
Well, that explains why. And more than likely, yeah. There's a glimmer of hope.
Are you ready to start?
Yes.
We're rolling.
Okay. Let me get this to go full screen.
The signal I'm getting is full screen.
It's weird.
Off tilt on that one, but not that one. Yeah, you're good on that projector.
Interesting.
Everybody move to that side of the room and watch it.
Yeah. Is it good? Can everybody tolerate this on this side? No?
Well, I don't know what we'll do to fix it, so.
Yeah.
We can move.
Okay. So, can everyone hear me okay? All right, awesome. So, I'm Joe Gray. This is OSINT for the win. Basically, I'm going to talk to you about how to do better penetration testing through your social engineering attacks using open source intelligence. So, about me, I'm an enterprise security consultant at Sword and Shield. I was in the Navy. I navigated submarines. I didn't touch IT per se. I've got a few certifications. I write blogs for anyone who's willing to listen. As noted in the introduction, I do have a blog and a podcast at advancedpersistentsecurity.net. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Before I moved to Tennessee from Georgia, I taught Introduction to Information Security and Introduction to Computing in colleges. So, with this presentation, I want to talk to you about what is open source intelligence, OSINT, social engineering in terms of what kind of social engineering you can perform, such as pretexting, the various types of ishing, as you can see up there, whaling, baiting, dumpster diving. We're not going to get too much into those. I just want you to be aware of those as possible vectors. We'll do some applied social engineering. Then we'll talk about enabling better social engineering through open source mitigation, and if we have time, we'll talk about training your teams for prevention. So, to talk about social engineering, what is it? In essence, it's human hacking. It is trying to get the target to either give you information or perform an action they wouldn't do so otherwise. So that typically bypasses your normal security controls, because in reality, you can spend $500,000, $5 million, $5 billion on technology, but if you can get a user to something and actually let that perform an action or change the firewall rule for you, you've negated it. So here's a few books I recommend. You definitely, Christopher Hadnagy's Social Engineering, Dr. Robert Cialdini's Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion, and then we can't talk social engineering without mentioning Kevin Mitnick. So The Art of Deception is another good one. With that being said, we have the pioneers of the art. I've mentioned 3 of them already. In the top left, you have Kevin Mitnick. The top right, you have Dr. Cialdini. The bottom right, you have Christopher Hadnagy. And then you have Frank Abagnale on the bottom left of Catch Me If You Can fame. He is who Leonardo DiCaprio depicted. So that was basically the story of his life. And since he's done his time, he's now a consultant for the FBI. He designs secure checks and does other things on the white hat side now. So moving on into examples of social engineering. We always hear about phishing, but then there's also spear phishing, which that's what this primarily is going to address, because you're going to hone in on a specific target. Whaling, which is social engineering the big fish, your C-level, your senior management. Vishing, which is voice phishing. Phishing, which is text message phishing. Baiting, that could be dropping USBs that say bonus data or layoffs or something like that to get someone to get curious and plug it in and then let it do your deed for you. Pretexting, which is basically when you take on a persona, which is exactly why we see Daniel Day-Lewis here. He's a method actor. With him, when he's portraying a character, he stays in character. I didn't know until I was actually researching for this talk, but when he filmed The Crucible, he did not bathe for 3 months because that was the norm in that time frame. While it's a good movie, I'm glad I didn't have to be around him, because if he ever went to DEF CON, he would learn the 3-2-1 rule, right? So with that being said, dumpster diving and tailgating are also options. So with social engineering and how this wraps into applied psychology, we have the 6 principles of persuasion, and this is the main idea of Dr. Cialdini's book, which he has more since then, but this book in particular, it's one of the most heavily cited books in the social engineering applied psychology fields. So reciprocity, commitment or consistency, social proof, likability, authority, urgency, scarcity. Think of the last time you bought a used car. The used car salesman might say something like, someone was just here to look at this car. They went to the bank to try to get financing. You must act now. Principle number 6. Or, man, imagine the chicks you would pick up in this car. Social proof. Or the other day I was at lunch and I overheard 2 gentlemen having a business lunch, and one of them said, oh, let me pick up this tab for you. And the gentleman, who I assume was the one that was the prospective buyer, refused. So the sales guy was like, oh, well, come on, I'll get the next one. I would really like you to come to this event. So basically he was trying to perform reciprocity, but he was getting shut down. So ultimately, there's just various ways that you could look at this that would actually appeal to the human psyche, right? So as I stated before, it's all about influencing people. There's a difference between influence and manipulation, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But ultimately, you're trying to get users to give you some sort of data. Ideally, you want sensitive data. You want the keys to the kingdom. You want, if you're pretexting as a user of a bank, you want that person on the other end of the phone to give you that person's bank account number. You want them to reset their username or their password to whatever you tell them to so that you can log in, which that's actually part of performing an action. But you want to find out something that's not online and readily available. Sometimes you don't necessarily get the information you're looking for, but, oh, I'm sorry, you can't provide me that. Can you tell me who would be a better point of contact, a little bit more knowledgeable, that could give me more information? A better target? Hey, that's just as good as the keys to the kingdom. And then, as Jason mentioned earlier, you can find out about the operating environment. What problems are you facing with your Active Directory? Oh, you don't use Active Directory? You use OpenLDAP? Really? Or whatever. What operating systems, what problems are you facing? You can easily that route. With performing an action, clicking a link, making a change to firewall rules, open an email, whatever. So, talking about open source intelligence, I actually got this definition from the CIA. Coincidentally, this did not come from WikiLeaks. This was done before everything dropped on the WikiLeaks about the CIA. But basically, some places you can get open source intelligence. You've got the internet. That's basically the motherlode. Traditional mass media. Some things might not be on the internet. It might be an old obscure newspaper from years ago. That's definitely an option. Specialized journal, conference proceedings. People always like to talk about what's new and hip at conferences. I mean, we're at a conference. So conference proceedings sometimes have very detailed information. If nothing else, it'll give you some context to be able to strike up a conversation with someone and be able to appeal to those 6 principles later. Photos, of course. Anyone who was at DerbyCon this last year, you might remember Josh Huff's talk where he extracted the metadata out of the reflection from, well, out of the picture with the reflection of the gas pump, and he determined what kind of car it was. That's exactly it. I always laugh because I don't have a good relationship with my dad, but he posted to Facebook a while back using his Android phone a picture off his front porch bragging about he had moved to the mountains and he was off the grid. Where's the logic in that? So, we're not friends on Facebook, but I laughed about it nonetheless. And then, of course, geospatial intelligence, geospatial information. Google Maps is an excellent resource because sometimes you need to know, my target organization, do they have a fence? Where are their dumpsters? Where's the smoking area? Whether you smoke or not, whether you vape or not, that's a great place to collect information. When I was an auditor for the Department of Defense, I smoked very heavily at the time, but even if I didn't, I would probably have still went to the area just to find out, because I found out so many things, so many projects that were underway that IT was not even aware of. Like, other business units were doing things in Google's public cloud and not telling us. So it's definitely useful. OSINT pioneers, there's really only one. And with that, you've got Michael Basil. So he's written some books. He's got his own podcast with Justin Carroll, the Security Podcast. Volume 2 of that book is coming out, I believe, this year. Open Source Intelligence Techniques, 5th edition just came out. I've heard that's the final rendition. So where can you get it, aside from what we've already mentioned? How many times have you been sitting in a bar? I mean, for those in attendance today that was at the Hilton last night, think of the conversations we could have overheard and what we could have done with that. I mean, the couple that was over in the corner smooching all night, we could have probably learned a lot about them. Probably from the sweet nothings that he was whispering. I don't know. Think of all the times that you've been in the mall and you hear someone just giving their credit card number over the phone because their account's locked out or something. Restaurants, of course, it's just like the story I told you earlier. I was sitting in Taste of Thai in Knoxville, Tennessee, hearing people go on about their business deal and how they're planning on franchising something out and making $150,000 a pop. Even if you don't have social media, your family and friends do. And for that, I can collect open source intelligence about you through them. Again, back to Jason's talk this morning, it's all about pivoting to those around you. It's your ecosystem. If you don't have social media or you have it ultra locked down, you still have to worry about your mom posting embarrassing pictures. It's a fact of life. You have to worry about people asking your friends and family questions about you that they could use against you later. And they could be absolutely benign, harmless seeming questions, but nonetheless. I like the back windshield approach, and we're going to talk about that on the next slide, but just know that this here puzzles me. What's going on with that family down there? It's in Baltimore, so you know, the person that took it, they live in Baltimore, but I don't know, they may have been driving back from Maury Povich or Jerry Springer. I am not sure. But I'm really interested to find out what's going on with that family. With this one, you can tell he's a veteran. With this one, traveling sports team. They all have websites. Those websites, they list the team's schedule. You can take the data, which we'll talk about on the next slide, and determine the probability of people being at home during that traveling team's sports schedule. If you wanted to break in, well, there's your time. What better time than then? Looking at a good example of open source intelligence, the number of times I've almost wrecked after doing this analysis the first time from trying to analyze the car in front of me and then them rapidly slowing down, I think they're on to me. But either way, with this, you can look at the family and you can easily build a profile on it, right? So Dad's he might be in shape or he might just think he's in shape. Either way, you might find Dad at the gym after work or very early in the morning. Mom's a teacher. So if you're gonna try something with that family, you're not going to want to do it in the summer. She's probably home. But if you're going to do it Monday through Friday between the hours of, say, 9 and 2, you have a pretty good chance of success. John plays soccer. John looks big enough to possibly be old enough for a high school sports team. They practice 3 to 5 days a week. Nobody's going to be home after school because Mom's still grading papers. Neil's probably at the skate park, so if you go with a Thrasher shirt and some Vans, you know, you might be able to talk some Tony Hawk with him and get some information out of him as well. The part that confuses me the most would be Jessica. I'm not sure if Jessica is old enough to babysit herself. I don't know about her extracurricular activities. We don't know a lot about her because of that. And then with Beaker and Ruby, we don't know what breeds they are. Ruby's a hound, so, well, looks to be a hound. So Ruby might be really loud if you're trying to do something around the house. Beaker, who knows? I mean, Beaker could be a Great Dane or a Chihuahua. We don't know. So when you're dealing with attacks, dealing with the human element, it's all about timing. You can't talk timing without having some Flava Flav. Mr. Cogsworth and, of course, Father Time, because it's applicable to both. In the Navy, we use the term slow is fast. And that didn't mean that you needed to be ridiculously slow to do anything, because when there's a fire, you need to move quickly to perform the actions that you're responsible for performing to ensure that everyone is able to live to make it back to the next port. But you don't do it at such a pace that you become reckless. So when you're doing this, you might have to do several rounds. If you're doing it fast, you might miss a lot of things that you might find if you're going a little bit slower and more methodical. It's all about the persistence and the details, because that's where the vitality lies. You might need to do several rounds of the same analysis on the same target because you might get something to refine that information each round. You might get a kid's name, a phone number, an employer, a place of business, something to work off of further. And then the faster you go, you're going to be sloppier. So to talk about how they mesh, they're similar in terms of human psychology, and you use your open source intelligence to build the dossier. That's going to provide better context for you talking to them. If you're going to go to the bar you know they hang out at, if you have some sort of context to talk to them about, that's going to be to your advantage. You can do better spear phishing, and then even better password guessing. There's a tool out on GitHub called Passwordology. It's spelled P-W-D-L-O-G-Y. It actually takes information that you input about your target and creates an intelligent password list about them. So take that for what it is. So at this point, we're going to talk a little bit about Facebook and Facebook Live, because we cannot talk social media without talking Facebook. We can't talk open source intelligence without talking social media. So we'll just look here really quick. This is a Facebook Live map. It's at facebook.com/live. States aren't showing up for, oh, here we go. oh, here's something in Indianapolis. Let's zoom in and see what's going on here. We might be able to get some data from it. There's a few things going on. So, waiting for it to load here. In the meantime, I'll go ahead and prep the next steps and the next steps. So, for whatever reason, this could be the two videos, unsure. And keep in mind, I am connected to the internet through my phone, so it might be a little slow. So for that, I apologize. So with this, okay, here we go. Okay, so they're living, right? Nothing big, no harm or foul. I mean, people are live. More people are alive. So, here's what we're looking for. We don't care about what they're talking about at this point. Here's what we care about. This is called the video ID. And here is Michael Basil's Intel Techniques website. If you go right here to the bottom and under video data, it's going to take you to this PHP file that he has operating on his site. And here we see all of the data about people on Facebook Live publicly. Well, not everyone, but people within reason. It's like the most viewed ones. So this may not work. It did. Look right here what we have. There's a latitude and a longitude. I don't mind if I do. So from there, we go here. See where he is. Okay. Let's get a better look. I'm not familiar with Indianapolis, so it might be something really obvious, but it might not be. I don't know. Well, he's somewhere in this area. So, he could be right here at this house. So I did this on a politically affiliated website a while back. Someone was, the talk was just absolutely hammering the snowflakes in Berkeley into the ground. It was a conservative-leaning website. So I did the same analysis on them, and I found that the lady was broadcasting from her home in Greenville, South Carolina. She lived in a cul-de-sac, had a white Yukon and a black Mercedes SUV. So, yeah. And there was no denying that it was her house because she was the only house in the cul-de-sac. So, be careful what you do publicly. I've not tested this to determine if you're using a proxy or a VPN, if that negates anything, but it's definitely, certainly an option. And I'm just starting something for the next part of the demonstration. So moving on back to the talk itself. So most of this starts with a single piece of information. You know your target. You know the business or the organization's name. You might know the person's name. When I have numbers that call me that I don't recognize, I try to run the intelligence on them. Most of the time they're spoofed, so it doesn't do any good. You might have an email address. You might have a physical address, a username, or some sort of metadata from like a photo. I always like to talk about the surveys. Think of when you're walking around through the mall or through a store and, hey, do you have 5 minutes to do a survey? We're going to randomly select someone for a $500 Amazon gift card, right? Think of the information they are asking for. They're asking for things that you can use to reset passwords, that could use to be to further advance other attacks. You don't know what they're going to do in terms of destroying the survey you write the data on. Honestly, I would be surprised if anyone ever actually won that $500 Amazon gift card. Honestly. But, sorry Salesforce if you're still in the room. I know there was a Salesforce employee earlier. But it's the core of marketing. This is what Salesforce is about. Facebook, you are the product. The same goes with Google. I mean, they're both excellent products, but they're not products. We are the products. The users of Facebook, the users of Google, those are the products. Retail stores. Think back to the story about Target. There was a young lady that had a rewards card through Target. She started receiving coupons for baby formula and diapers. Mind you, she was 16 years old. Dad sees the coupons and starts poking around, prodding, asking questions. Oh, no, Dad, I'm not pregnant. I'm not pregnant. Took a pregnancy test. Yes, she was. Target realized before she knew or her dad knew because her shopping habits had changed. And while that's not true open source intelligence, it's closed for the most part, it's still intelligence. It's an example of how it can be applied. So you've got to pull that yarn a little bit more. To quote Weezer, just pull the string as I walk away. And with that, things can be linked to you. Password dumps. Have I been pwned is a great place. Before it went away, leaked source. For $4, you had 24 hours of access to leaked passwords, like actual passwords in some cases. Sometimes it was only the hash. Nonetheless, it's not hard to crack a hash if you have a little context around it. Email accounts, again, public records, court records, the news. Because I've appeared on the local news in Tennessee, I could never hide from the internet again. Because I'm speaking here today, I can never hide from the internet again. It's okay. Blogs, well, can't hide there either. Websites, same thing. Employer posts and data. Press releases. For publicly traded companies, SEC filings, Form 10K, it's a beautiful thing. And then, of course, friends on social media. As I said before, this is not one and done. You might need several rounds. You might be at the final stage of your intelligence gathering, and you might find something that's like, you know what, I need to go back and apply this into my analysis and use it to gather more information. You might need to do that to look at it from a different angle. You might not have thought about something. At this point, we kind of reiterate the 6 principles: reciprocity, commitment, consistency, social proof, likability, authority, urgency, scarcity. Think about malware. You need to click this and you need to pay us money because the FBI says you need to. Or the phone calls. This is the IRS. You need to pay us in Apple gift cards. Calling from a Miami phone number. When did you move from DC to Miami? Okay. But anyway, so at this point we apply those principles. You know enough about the person you're after. So when you're sending them the phishing email, you have the context. You know what they're going to click on. It's like the example Jason provided earlier with, hey, I had a really good time at my going away party. My vacation was great. I'm settling into North Carolina. By the way, this happened. Link out of nowhere. And then blah, 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 blah. You have enough context to make them think that that link is associated with it. You don't have to say it. You just have to infer it. And then, of course, pretexting and impersonation. In my current role, I actually do some pretexting and impersonation. I've dealt with some financial institutions, some manufacturing companies, so on, and you just have to get into character. The first client that we dealt with, we had this story. We had a baby crying in the background. We were in Walmart. We needed some account information. We really had to do this. It didn't work. So we called an audible. We spoofed an internal number from legal, and we called their CFO, and we said that, hey, so-and-so that we go to church with, he's trying to get an internship with the FBI. You know, we got robbed a few months ago. He needs some data about the financial impact of a bank robbery. He's reached out to SunTrust, Fifth Third, and BB&T, and they all shot him down. Can you help? Oh, yeah, I sure can. I sure can, Miss Such and Such. Okay, excellent. What email address do I give him? Because this company was in Tennessee, I actually had to use my authentic Tennessee accent because that's where I'm from. It took a long time for me to actually get away from it as this. It took about 7 years of being in the Navy to do that. But anyway, my email address is such and such at somewhere. Okay. About 7 minutes and 43 seconds later, I pressed send from a Gmail account. And it was nothing but a link to the survey. 15 clicks later on his work computer, 5 clicks on his cell phone later, he emails back and says, hey buddy, that link didn't work. Can you send it to me as a file? Yes, we can. So there goes the macro-enabled Word document. Well, he emails back and says, hey, that opened up the first time, but it was really fuzzy. So I clicked that thing, and it was still fuzzy. So I thought my computer was broke, so I closed it, and I opened it again. Now my virus scanner won't let me open it. Do you have another file? Yes, we do. So next time, here comes an executable disguised as an Excel spreadsheet. I think you know where that story's going and what happened. Yeah. But then later on, like a manufacturing company, I called them as HR. And we had sent them emails from intimmelrevenueservice.com. I had a bogus site for their HR company. So it worked perfectly. But, you know, we didn't get a lot of people to take the bait on that one. By a show of hands, who here has heard of this sinister website? It's quite possibly the most brutal attack tool known to man. It's called Family Tree Now. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to show you a little bit of fun I've had with, not with them, but at their expense. So, by a show of hands, who here's familiar with like Social Engineer Toolkit? Okay. So there's this really awesome function in it, and I'm about to show you, just for the giggles. I try to stay anti-cliche. But anyway, so right here we have the SE Toolkit, you know. Thank you, Adrian's parent company, for maintaining such a wonderful tool. Nonetheless, we're going to look at social engineering attacks, specifically website attack vectors, credential harvesting, and the site cloner. At this point, I'm just going to step through this. I'm not actually going to perform everything, but you just input the IP address. So I'm just going to give it, you know, home, no big deal. And then we'll do... So we do that, it's doing all that. Okay, good. Well, yeah, I don't have Apache running on this one, so you're not going to see anything here. So we'll just close that there. I'll go ahead and exit all that good stuff. But we do have the file hanging out here. Actually not there. So that's, you know, your index data here. So that index 1 or index2.html and index.html, that would be the data that's copied. So that's where Family Tree Now would exist. So anyway, in the other instance, basically I sent an email out from a domain that I do own, familytreenow.online. And basically it says that someone input information about you on Family Tree Now, and we would like you to validate it. Upon clicking it, there's also an opt-out option too, because that's always good. But anyway, it takes you here. For reference, the website has changed since I did this, but this is the real website. This is not the real website. But anyway, you can do all the stuff here. Nothing big. I've taken all the links that would be for familytreenow.com out, and basically there's nothing there. But if you want to validate the information, let's look at what kind of information they want us to validate. Let's see here. There's first name, last four, date of birth, address, city, state, zip code, mother's first name, mother's maiden name, mother's last name, father's first name. Imagine what you can do with this. And then if you click submit, oh no, there's a payload. Oh no, oh no. And this was built specifically for awareness type things, so I didn't want to get too sinister with it. You know, with Rick Astley, it's not too sinister. But nonetheless, that is a point. What also occurs during this time is there's I actually monitor the Apache logs, and when you hit validate, everything that you input in those fields is input into the GET request. So I capture it all in the Apache logs. So there it is. You know, I just navigate to that, and it's there. Or if you want to opt out, it's, you know, you click here to opt out, and anybody want to guess what happens when you opt out? Oh no! It's him again! But nonetheless, I mean, that took almost no time at all. Realistically, the hardest part really was just stopping the Apache instance so it don't get detected. But anyway, it didn't take long. I just had to go through and do like some edit alls, nothing hardcore, to be able to put that together. And I've not got to use it in an engagement yet, but I have a feeling that whenever it goes, it's going to be pretty successful. But nonetheless, now that we're past the technical piece of it, we'll hit a little bit of mitigations and then start to finish up. So, can you effectively mitigate social engineering? That's a double-edged sword, and it's a philosophical debate. Honestly, some people are going to say yes, some people are going to say no, some people are going to say maybe. I come from the school of, for the most part, maybe. Because you can have technical mitigations like Proofpoint. That's going to tell you this email is coming from an external source. Even though it says it's internal, it's coming from an external source. That still relies on your users to actually not click it. If you make it juicy enough, I mean, in January, if you offer them a W-2, or if in November you offer them a free turkey, they're going to click it, straight up. Malware protection, if that's what they're going for. IDS signatures to some degree. User behavior analytics can actually kind of do that. But in all caps, having open source intelligence and social engineering campaigns against your employees, that is the most ideal mitigation. And I'm not a sales guy for Sword and Shield. You don't have to do it through Sword and Shield. You could do it through TrustedSec, Black Hills, anybody. It doesn't matter who. But it's usually better to have someone from the outside do it, especially the open source intelligence portion of it, because as a security professional within an organization, you do not want to betray your employees' trust. Let someone else be the bad guy. I mean, I just want to see things get better. If Sword and Shield makes money off of it, great. If somebody else does, awesome. No big deal. But then you have your administrative mitigations as well. Having policies in place, like your acceptable use policy, awareness. Dealing with personal devices, that's definitely one as well. Standards of conduct, and again, awareness. Most importantly, train your people. Training is a low-cost solution that really can, it's not going to be 100% effective, but it's going to bring up the rear a little bit. You make it relatable to people. I like to use what's called the SMART framework: specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. If you do that and you maintain their interest and show them how their actions impact the organization, you'll have a better outcome. Because realistically, insider threat, social engineering plays into that. I call people who are untrained that fall victim to social engineering, I call that passive insider threat. Active insider threat being someone with malicious intent. Nonetheless, you have your training recurring. You don't do the check the box once a year and move on. No. Because that's 364 days for them to forget. You do something weekly, monthly, quarterly, something. You have to have management commitment from the CEO to the janitor. If you have management commitment, that actually plays into the authority principle of persuasion. It will better persuade the people lower on the totem pole to actually do things to help your organization. Role-based training is also important. As an IT professional, if I get an email with an attachment, I'm probably not going to open it. If I worked in human resources and it said resume, yeah, I would. If it were accounting, if I were in accounting and it said invoice, you guessed it. Contracting. Management, they kind of, I'm not saying they think they're above the rules, but management kind of thinks that they're immune to things, that they're untouchable, especially those with assistants. If you can make it through them, I mean, it's over and done with. Help desk. I mean, they're going to get calls and they're going to get solicited to reset passwords, create accounts, whatever. Non-technical personnel. And this is in addition to general training across the board. And your C-level suite and your senior management needs customized training as well, because they face different problems than the technical team, than HR, than everybody else, really. And this is the final rant about training. You need to clearly define who you want things to be reported to, how you want it to be reported, what you want people to do if they receive a fish, if they fall for the fish, if they fall victim. Because this actually falls into your incident response plan, and it's going to make it a lot easier for you. If you know where patient 0 is, your incident response process is going to tremendously. With that being said, you need to let them know what to do with their computer. If they click a fish, do you want them to shut it down, pull the network cable, step away, lock the screen, do nothing? What? Do you want them to contact you via email, phone, walk over, carrier pigeon? What? You need to define that. And most importantly, a non-punitive policy. People are not prone to report if they think they're going to get in trouble. You reward those who do report, and those who report that they've done things, don't hold it against them. Obviously, if it becomes a trend and they're reporting something every week, you might want to consider something else. But an honest mistake here and there, no problem. But you need to be cautious with gamification. So if you have users that report, hey, I got this phishing email, hey, I got this, hey, I got this, eventually they're going to start signing up for phishing lists so they can get the prize, whatever the prize is, especially if you give them time off. So just understand what happened with Wells Fargo and the incentive program there with the fake accounts before you start gamifying something. I recommend things like a parking spot, free lunch, stickers, yellow stickies of appreciation. I'm a huge fan of those. Challenge coins, those work as well. I wouldn't appeal to a candy bar. I'm diabetic. I'd be like, what, are you trying to kill me? So with that being said, here's how you contact me. I'm on Twitter at C_3PJoe and also at ADVPersistSec. I'm on LinkedIn. There's my email addresses, my personal, well, my quasi-personal and my work one. Blogging the podcast is at advancedpersistentsecurity.net. Podcast is basically everywhere you can find podcasts. Any questions in the meantime? Questions, comments, complaints, grievances, thoughts, opinions, other statements? Okay, so I'm further obligated to show you this slide of here's how you contact Sword and Shield. So there's the address, social media. If you want a consultation, secure me at swordshield.com. And here's my further speaking engagements. If anyone's interested, I will be back at Circle City Con, and I will be giving open source intelligence and social engineering 4-hour training in addition to a talk. So again, any questions, anything of the sort? Okay. Thank you very much.
Social engineering?
I believe so. I'm not 100% sure. I know we do them as part of a pen test, and I know that it's on the business card. on the back. So
Thank you.
thank you.
Next up, we have Rich Rumble, and he has a cool Guy Fawkes mask as his avatar. So he's probably going to tell you how to socially engineer people. So today, Rich is talking about physical phishing, way beyond USB drops. So, thanks.
Thank you.
Glad to grease the skid for you.
You covered all my stuff.
Yeah, so after your talk, we have Chris Roberts. Side Dragon. You're set to end at 3:30, but since you're starting a bit late, but I was just saying, be mindful of like how we might have to like have them ask questions after, if that's cool with you.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
you're not rushed. Take the time you need to get through.
Okay.
Do you need the Adrian's dongle?
I'll need HDMI, it looks like.
Adrian, I'm passing your dongle to them.
Thank you. All right. You need levels or anything, Adrian?
Make sure you're wearing the microphone.
Yeah.
The mic.
Yep. Testing, testing. You got me?
And we will start here very short.
Okay.
Okay, rolling.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Rich. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Talking about physical phishing, USB drops. I'm sure everyone is familiar and seen headlines where they drop USB keys in a parking lot and everyone in the company picks them up and puts them in. That didn't happen with my users, so that kind of made me mad when they were turning them all in. So I had to do something bigger and better, or something alternative. So I'm here to talk about some of those alternatives and some of the schemes that have worked and some that haven't. So Jason was supposed to be here, so I put in a little extra "I love you" to him. So, the essence of the talk, the TLDR, is I'm going to make something nice and shiny that I want you to plug in, and I'm going to Trojanize it. So you don't have to stick around if that's all you want to get out of it. I don't know Python programming, but this looks dangerous, so I don't think I'll ever learn it. And I'm only putting in one meme. I'm not that clever usually, so that's as clever as it gets. So again, we've made USB drops. They didn't quite work in the normal, the mic and the R2D2 and the Yoda USB drops weren't very effective. So you can't tell from the picture, but there's a tape dispenser up there by the Archer picture, and it has a USB hole in the back of it. And I just set that down in the reception area to see if anybody would pick it up. This was before Archer Season 6 came out, and the meme says, do you want Season 6? Because this is how you get Season 6, implying that there was Season 6 on the USB drive that was inside the tape dispenser. No one picked up the tape dispenser, but they did take the cord. So then I put another cord back in there that I had Trojanized with what you see there below is a few different flash drives. You can find them small enough if you look in the very center. This little one here on the right there, it's not very long, and you can take out what was in there before and put something new in, and the actual cord is the Trojan. You don't have to have it necessarily plugged into a device. The cord won't work, of course, but you can just stick that little guy inside of USB housing, and you've got the same thing in essence. Previous work that inspired that one, I believe Adrian and even Dave Kennedy have talked about these Trojanized mice. They'll embed a little USB hub inside a mouse or a keyboard. There's an actual project out there called The Glitch that is designed for you to specifically do this. And they have hardware diagrams out there. At the end of the talk, there's some links to The Glitch. There's also, yeah, like I said, keyboard. However, this keyboard has the USB hub built into it, so you don't even need to solder in a USB hub. And so very simple to Trojanize a keyboard, and who wouldn't like a nice new sexy wireless keyboard, or well, in this case a wired keyboard that you maybe won in the sweepstakes, or just happened to show up on your desk one day. Somebody dropped it off for you. Previous works also in this area, Poison Tap from Sammy K. He took a Raspberry Pi, and I have it quoted as Raspberry Pi Zero, costing $5. It cost $9 to ship. So I don't know why everybody says it's $5, but everywhere I bought it from, and it's very small, it's very sexy. Yeah. And yeah, so very small, very powerful little Raspberry Pi device. And as it says here in all the bullet points, it emulates a Ethernet device over USB. So when you plug it in, your computer automatically trusts it. They did the same thing with the Land Turtle. Muvix, I believe, did that as well. So as soon as you plug it in, your box actually asks it for a route, and you can have it route all your internet traffic through that little device. It's persistent. It creates a backdoor into your machine, and it is literally very, very small. You would just have to put it in a nice, pretty package that someone would want to plug in. And so further on in the talk, I'll get into the pretty packaging that I've been trying to shove that into. Recently, Hack 5 has come out with the Bash Bunny, which I have not gotten my hands on yet, but I've read all the specs on it. It looks like it's going to be mostly the same thing as the Poison Tap, where it emulates USB over Ethernet. Also gives you dedicated shell access, payloads. So not too bad a price. Yeah. So essentially, the Raspberry Pi is also a Linux usually version. So $14.99. You probably easier to use the $99 one actually, if the rubber ducky is any indication of how easy it is to use their tools. So some of the slide is in a bit of disarray, but I'm also calling physical phishing phi phishing, so that's trademarked. So I don't know if somebody's around, but copyright, trademark, phi phishing. You can add that to your issues. Where do you go? You forgot that one. Pony Express makes this little power strip down there, and anything you plug into it gets owned. No, that's not how it works. But it does have a you can't see. I wish I had a laser pointer or laser eyes. Maybe that would work. But it has essentially a computer back there by the power switch, and listens for your Wi-Fi, listens for Bluetooth, anything that's coming by, and it's a nice little hack in a box that just about anybody's going to plug in. It's pretty unassuming, a power strip, but it listens for all your network traffic. You can even plug network into it, I believe. But it's a nice little device that the Pony Express people, which Jason Street earlier this morning, he was from them. That's just one of their devices. They have several that are really, really great. Oh, wrong way. So I'm going to talk about one of our most successful fishes, and I have a lot of props. I feel like Carrot Top up here, so you guys are probably actually going to have to come up and check these things out yourself, or maybe after the talk. I'll just move over there. Yeah, sure. Thank you. The others make it explode? All right. Yeah, all right. And don't look at... Okay. All right. So, yes. We created a Doom 4, 5, whatever Doom is now, in September last year was coming out. And so I created these little invitations to a beta that supposedly, the pretext was, there's a little envelope package that arrived at the office, and inside of it had letterhead from Bethesda that said your office was selected to participate in this Doom pre-beta, and here are 25 free passes to download the beta. And the lawyers had a conniption over me using all the branding and calling out Doom and making Bethesda letterhead. So we didn't officially use this at the company, but my boss is kind of cool, and he just dropped it off somewhere in a conference room. And so instead of sending it, we unofficially this fish. Anyway, someone opened it in the conference room and passed them all out, and we had 28 people out of the 25 download this hardware profiler. So it's 101%, or well, 110%, which is great effort by my team. They give 110%. And yeah, nobody could wait. We're a tech savvy office, so I was pretty sure it was going to work. But anyway, the lawyers did not like it, so we weren't going to send it in the mail and commit mail fraud or whatever else they thought we'd be, whatever toes we'd be stepping on. However, it was a bit.ly address on the back of the card, not really a, because the domain I registered was doorn.tech, because doom.tech was taken, and all the other domains were taken. So DOORN looks just like DOOM in a browser. So watch out if you have IMs in your domains. You might want to register the RN version of it, and I'll probably touch on that some more throughout the talk, because it's one of my favorites. So yes, DOORN.tech, it's actually still up. I think it's going to expire this month. So get your hardware profiler now. Girl Scouts of America came out with Girl Scouts cookies last 2 months ago, I guess. So that was going around, so it's a timely time to send out a fish around this. So I actually have a... Is anybody familiar with S3 from Amazon? Oh yeah, here it is. It's not a fishing website. So if you look at the URL, it's girl-scouts.s3.amazonaws.com. This is the actual domain, because S3 is a first come, first served basis on the name of the buckets you choose. So if you go out to S3 and you register, if you apply a name to your bucket, and this one is girl-scouts, and fill in the information. Let's do this. Adrian Crenshaw. Oh yeah, at irongeek.com. Is it com or org? Com. You're com today. All right. Anyway, did not work as far as going to another page. It uses get instead of post. So up here in the top, you can see name equals Adrian, email equals Crenshaw. There are other fields that are off the screen, such as phone number, organization, address, postal, city, country, credit card number, month, year, blah, 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 the CCV. This is taking advantage of the pre-population of your form data that Google often likes to do. This is Firefox in this case, but Chrome would have filled this out had I had Adrian Crenshaw's information. The other information would probably all have pre-populated in that form. The other form elements are far to the left, minus 500 pixels or so. And there's I can't remember who I lifted this from. It is from this GitHub here. This guy. And he was nice enough to show everyone in the world that this is a thing. Here's the Doom pre-release. Got an invite and a code. Enter your email address. So I got more email addresses. I got 25 codes. They all entered the same code. However, they were iterative. So they got together, and one person did figure out the next code that it would have been and put it in. And they were able to download just a hardware profiler, well, quote-unquote hardware profiler, that just ran a ping back to us and said, hey, somebody on this machine name installed this. And that's all it did, but it gave a message that it was inconclusive that your network card or your video card was up to snuff. So another S3 bucket. Here is o365.s3-website you as Amazon.com, Amazon AWS.com. So now Microsoft has given up on Azure and just switched to Amazon. Which I think that's fair. They know their beat. That's nice of them to give it up. But yeah, this would work just the same. And yeah, as long as you reserve the S3 bucket, you can serve a web page from S3, which is just a data storage on Amazon. And here's Google giving it up to be on Amazon now. So Amazon's rife for abuse, and who doesn't trust Amazon, right? So back to the slides real quick. So the Girl Scouts of America, yeah, that was an entrance to win, Girl Scout cookies for a year. If you want to avoid lawyers and things like that, you probably don't want to brand it Girl Scouts of America. You could say, you know who, and use that green and maybe put a cookie up there or something and kind of hint at it's Girl Scouts of America, but it's not actually Girl Scouts of America. All right, where were we? Yes. So the search you get from Amazon. Who doesn't trust Amazon? And I am going to go quick because I know we don't have a lot of time. So I'm going to hopefully have questions at the end for you guys, or I'll answer them. So I have here, again, my Carrot Top. These were $17 on Amazon. It's just an empty shell. You put your cell phone in it, and then you got VR goggles. So if you were to be sent this at your office, maybe you would be interested in seeing what happens with VR goggles. You'd probably put some crappy burner phone in here, and then maybe put in the Poison Tap Raspberry Pi Zero instead of, or if you're smart enough, and I'm not, so that's why I didn't do it, to get your payload into the phone itself, or use that stupid cord I made earlier, and that cord is the only one that makes this work for some reason. Maybe you're to use that, and they install drivers for it, and then you own their machine because they wanted to plug in a $17 headset when they probably shouldn't have done that at work. So that's the gist of most of my fish, is trying to figure out what I can cram a Raspberry Pi Zero into, or a flash drive into, and get users to want to install it. I have tons of ideas about that, and we've only done it once, and the USB drops were a failure, but someone wanted to plug in my tape dispenser, or at least the cord from my tape dispenser, which was odd. So yeah, the cell phone could be the payload. More advanced, maybe you send them something that actually works. So maybe you put a little crappy old iPhone 4 you used to have, and you load some VR app on it, and maybe that actually works. But maybe it still needs a driver to install, so you include a little flash drive, or you include a CD. Does anybody have CD-ROMs anymore? No? Flash drive. Or maybe there's a driver they download from doorn.tech to make the new Doom VR work on it. And then maybe that cell phone has an open Wi-Fi or Bluetooth to to the packaging itself. So this box actually has a lot of open area, and if I was to put foam in the box, or something to conceal another way to exfiltrate data. So if I was to put a cell phone in this box that was communicating to the driver was able to communicate to the cell phone because you installed it on your laptop, and maybe I can talk Bluetooth to you. You can exfil without going through their network. You can have their machine connect to maybe the packaging instead of the actual VR goggles themselves. So with all the ubiquity of all these little devices and how easy it is to program and how everybody is a developer now, the sky's the limit for your imagination. You can do the things that were always depicted in spy movies and the CIA, and all the cool who was it, Q, and some of those other things. And this is just a link to magnetic enclosures, which are $1.50 to get. They are dirt cheap. They look professional enough that they look professional enough that it sells the fact that someone's getting a gift. And it seems like it's not, illegitimate. It came in a magnetic box. It looks nice and shiny, and so you can print a logo on these little boxes, and they don't cost that much. But it's a very professional package, and they are very cheap, and anybody can put a photo here. You don't have to have them print it. So that's another idea. So some of the ideas I've had, some of the things I've seen on the internet that just, I love them so much. And if someone sent me one, I am plugging it right in. Would be, I don't know if you've seen 3D scanner, but there's a handheld 3D scanner. You scan objects, and you can have them ready for your 3D printer in like no time. Laser tag. Has anybody played laser tag in a while? It's a lot of fun. Somebody sent me a laser tag system, and it needed update drivers or something like that. I'm going to plug it in. Something to spy on my neighbors. Okay, maybe I want to do that. Retro gaming system. Yeah, again, I have more props. I've got a little. Anybody heard of the Retro Pi project? Yeah. So it's Raspberry Pi, but it can play old MAMEs, or it plays MAME ROMs. Your old video games come back to life, and you actually play on a controller that goes to USB to your Raspberry device. So retro gaming system, if you had it all enclosed in one little Nintendo or Genesis, or I'm sorry, Sega, PlayStation, whatever might meet their fancy, doing open source intelligence on them. Maybe you know they're a Sega fan, maybe you know they're a Nintendo fan, maybe they're a Microsoft fan, so you can send them a 360 controller and say, if you plug this into your computer and run the drivers, then you can play all your old games again right from this little controller. It's nice and portable, so you can own their organization, because they'll probably do it at work if you send it to them at work. Again, preview of the long delayed game. Doom was way long delayed, so I wanted to play it. So I came up with that fish. And that was 110% effective. Let's see, other things. Crowdfunded password manager. It's an idea I'm working on. Just a little physical device that manages your passwords, but it doesn't. You'd think it does. I have more. Again, I have a lot of little props, and I don't want to be Carrot Top and just show them everything. But please come by and see me later. I have an RFID wall plate skimmer. It's just like an ATM skimmer, but it fits over the wall plates of the RFIDs we see all around buildings, and can stay powered for about a week. I don't remember what the light bulb was. This is if anybody's not familiar with this work, it's great. This is also physical penetration testing in the literal sense, where they have a vampire tap, if you're familiar with the term. So this little tiny little device right here, it's no bigger than whatever coin denomination that is. Very, very small. It gets put in behind the shell. You can see right up here. It gets put in behind the shell of the RFID reader, and it sits physically on the wires and listens to what happens as people card in and card out, and it saves it all inside of itself. And then you walk by with your Bluetooth on your phone, and you download all of them later, and then you make clones of all the IDs you got. So right here in this video, they're showing you in, I think it takes about a minute and a half for him to punch down the wires into these two little clips, screw everything back together, and then start getting card data. So he's got it all back together. He puts a card on there, and the door opens, and his phone gets a little page because he's close enough to it that here's a new RFID. So I'm working on something similar, but it's a clamshell that goes over the box, because on these boxes now, they actually have a little LED in the back that once you take it off the back of the wall, it triggers an alarm. I don't know if everybody's configured by default to notice it, but it does trigger an alarm if you take those off. And I've got a bunch of credits here for things that are better than I have. Again, Adrian has done a programmable human input device keyboard dongle, and that was great inspiration for me. There's a lot of stuff at Black Hat, and that's where I got some of the first slides, so I wanted to give credit where credit was due. We do phishing campaigns at work, but mostly it's the email type. We don't feel anybody's equipped to deal with these kind of attacks yet. Not many of them happening other than the USB drops in parking lots. So I wanted to take it to the next level and make this a reality. And so far, we've got sign off on one project, and other customers are interested. So we're hoping to get other people to think evil, but do positive things with it. So yeah, I guess I'll open up to questions. That's pretty much it. It's not a complex topic, I don't think. Going once, going twice. All right, well, you guys will please come over and see me. I have all kinds of gadgets in this bag, and a lot more fun things to share. Thank you for your time.
front door there, we kept it so they'll folks will know they can come in.
Wait, no, this. Should just be me one time. No, I wish I could speak to that.
Okay. Okay, I think even the manager's studio, I should have hit it while I was doing my thing.
Splash down. Okay. Splash down.
Yep, it's Chris Robbins. Oh, exactly. And then you lay it on and then I'll fill. That's right. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Hello, friends. While we're waiting for Chris to come in and set up, I just want to remind you all about hacker self-care. And if you've been sitting in your seat for more than 45 minutes, please stand up, stretch your legs, stretch your arms, get a cup of water. This isn't a marathon. It's supposed to be some snacks still out in the hallway. You have a minute to go get a delicious pastry or some water, but please take care of yourselves. Okay.
We've lost the lead.
I haven't been to ISSA for a while.
We've lost the lead.
Yeah.
It's from RBS.
No. Drugs.
Team.
Team with every diacritic. It's only first place.
Shooting for second place is an icon thing to do.
There is second place.
It's the race. Yeah, sure.
Is there third place?
Sorry, you're going the wrong way.
It's not about the prices, it's about the winners.
Good. You alright? Yeah, mostly. Are we on static line or are we going to walk around?
That works. You do have something to wander around. You can't pull that out of the base.
Okay.
And we have to put it on the lavalier mic. That one's for the.
Can I use that one?
Well, not only. One is for recording. One is for the house.
Okay, gotcha.
Oh, whose computer is this?
I don't know. Whoever did the Flatbed Trojans, please hold.
Rich, your laptop.
Is this yours? Give me at least 10 more seconds.
Oh, sorry.
There should be a video as a background.
Someplace. Preferably should instead of the lanyard. Lanyards move and then you have
All the crunchy crackly stuff. Hang on, I'll throw the lanyards inside for now. Hang on. Frickin'.
I did a try library book.
You got the lavalier one, you walk around the block.
Yeah, I got the walk around.
and you can also pull out that stand.
Do I have to use that or not?
Well, you can speak really loud.
I can talk loudly, and if you buggers can't hear me, move forward. No, because I like bollocks to that. Hang on for a wee second. There we go. Why does it feel like this thing?
No show choir, man. No show choir dancing. No show choir dancing.
You know when you get on an airplane, just before you walk onto the plane, you just do that, and everybody behind you goes, bastard. Only sub.
Not United.
Only sub. No, not United, not Delta, not
Did they
American,
seriously red
not
card
Air
you?
Canada.
Did they seriously red card you for ever writing?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, they were very clear. There is an entire new line in the database with my name on it. chain and said, number one, you don't have anything in the seat of the back of the seats, therefore he's not going to bug around with your systems. Yeah, pretty much anybody who's part of the Star Alliance, or who sympathizes, no shit, or who sympathizes with Star Alliance. Adrian, I love the jury-rigged kind of...
Yeah, it fell off. When it came with, fell off or something like that.
How's that? Does that work? That works? Oh, I don't mind. What?
I have to introduce you.
No!
Yeah.
Come on, this is good. I'll do one side, you do the other side. This is like those earthquake... It's like the earthquake simulators.
What? I don't want to be on the TV thing.
Our job was stand a tremor.
No, I don't. I'll check. See, this one's not even on.
I turned it off deliberately. It was annoying me.
Hello? Hello? Hi. So you're not going to use the mic?
No, I'm going to use this thing. I'm going to talk. If you guys can't hear me, walk forward. Sit forward.
You can all sit on the floor just here.
We have one of those little informal sessions.
Of the time the plane flew sideways? No. Just kidding. All right, folks. As you're getting settled, I'll introduce Chris Roberts, my friend and a very entertaining speaker, and we're so thankful to have you here with us today.
It's fun.
Nanotech, weaponizing nanotech, so it's going to be fun and scary.
No, we'll have some fun with it.
Super scary. Ooh. Yes, it's story time with Daddy Chris.
Have you guys all heard Chris Roberts speak before?
How many of you heard me up at GERCON okay, so I'll apologize up front for this one. Why isn't it working? What did I do? Did I break it?
Not GERCON this year.
So GERCON, yeah, just gone. So I did a nanotech one up at GERCON, and then I've done a whole bunch of research since then. But unfortunately, the powers that be, i.e. lawyers, figured out what I was about to talk about. And as of, what day are we on today? Saturday. As of Tuesday, some of the new stuff I've done, I'm not allowed to talk about. But the old stuff, because Adrian thankfully recorded it last year and put it up on the internet, there's nothing they can say about it, apart from yell at me, which is what they normally do anyway. So all the new shit that I can't talk about, which involves hacking even more humans with even more stuff, and being able to take over some of the blood barrier stuff, I definitely can't say anything about the fact that we've done blood barrier work. And what else am I not allowed to talk about? Oh, the cardiovascular system, we can now hack that. So I definitely didn't say that.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. Are we recording?
Yes.
Excellent. Evidence item number 2. No, you're good. I don't care. I really don't care. All right, how's everybody doing? All right, so we're going to have a little bit of fun. So part of the upside thing that I'm allowed to do with the Acalvio guys is I get to throw the crystal ball out. I'm going to walk and this is going to rattle. I'll apologize now. I get to throw the crystal ball out a little bit further. So I'm not necessarily looking at exploits. I'm not necessarily looking at the stuff that's coming down the line in the next couple of years. I will be perfectly honest, for the most part, I've kind of given up with mainstream humanity. I got asked about passwords the other day, and I said I've given up with everybody. Skynet was right. And this will explain some of it. So before we start, there's always the there's the
That projector's doing that. That one's fine.
No, they're both doing it. What'd you do? You can't blame the Mac. Hang on.
Oh,
The slides go inside.
yeah, Adrian.
I unplugged it at this end. No. Alright, yeah. If all those failed. Alright, let's see if the... Hang on. Alright, yeah, so the mandatory FBI slide, needless to say, we are going to be talking about bunnies, therefore they can now turn off their recorders and they can bugger off. Nice and simple. Standard housekeeping slides. Obviously, huge shout out to our two hosts at the very front here. Please, very much at the end of them, make sure you give them hugs and thanks for all of us being here. If you were at the IoT cookie, we had cookies, kind of, and you could have stolen them. Chester and a couple of the other guys for helping out, FA for helping out set it up. Ask questions. We're going to go through some fun stuff here. We're definitely going to go through some stuff that is not of the normal in the hacking sphere side of things. And you can see the last one, hug a vet. So, on with the talk. We're going to have a little bit of fun with this one. We are going to talk about minions. Part of the reason we're going to talk about minions is several years ago, we stood up and did a whole bunch of other talks. And we want to really talk about those kind of minions. But the backstory is several years ago, did a whole bunch of talks and series of talks and like by land, by sea, by air. And as it's well pointed out, we hacked airplanes, we hacked cars. We hacked pretty much anything that didn't move much faster than us. We hacked the Mars rover, got yelled at for that one. We managed to get it to play Freddie Mercury plays God Save the Queen for about 30 seconds until they figured out what the hell we were doing. We got yelled at on that one. IoT, all sorts of interesting fun stuff. We got the village going off on that one. So now we decided to go after minions. And we're going to have some fun with this one, because obviously when you decide you want to go after minions and you decide you want to hack humans, there's a little bit of trial and error that's involved. If Hollywood has anything to be believed by, this is where trial and error really ends up. This is the whole Skynet side of things, which, quite honestly, if you look at where technology is taking us, there's an interesting barrier that I think we've actually not just approached, but we've hit pretty much so head-on at full steam, when we are starting to blur the lines between what we consider reality and what the machines consider reality. That is not the topic for today, but it is actually an interesting topic for anybody who really, really wants to go down that route. And obviously, we've chosen our friendly cyborg friends for this one, for which it always brings up the same question. For those of you who've watched that movie, which bloody timeline are we actually now on in that movie? For those of you that remember the old stuff, yeah. We have made a lot of mistakes in some cases. But we come down to a couple of simple things when we're looking at hacking humans. There's a few different ways we can do it. We can take the mainstream route, which is endoskeletons and exoskeletons. If we take our friend Mr. Wolverine as a wonderful idea, looks cool when the claws come out, and to some degree you're pretty well bulletproof. But I'd hate to be trying to do up my damn flies when those claws are out as well. It ain't going to be pretty. If you take the exoskeleton on that stuff, nice, fun, and actually from a military standpoint, they're actually doing some pretty amazing development on those things. But downside is they're cumbersome at the moment. They're a pain in the ass to get on. And when they go around, all the batteries run out, all hell breaks loose. So what other options do we have when we talk about hacking humans? Quick slot. Obviously, you can reanimate the dead if we go back to our friends at Hollywood and we go back to some of the other stuff in history. It's great, gets a little bit messy and involves lightning. Not much fun. You can steal body parts. You get yelled at for doing that kind of stuff these days. Endoskeleton stuff, obviously superpowers. Exoskeleton stuff, bit of a challenge on that one as well. And then, God, this thing is, I feel like I'm going to fall through this in a second. The bonding of human and tech. We obviously now have, and have been for a few years at this stage, where we've been looking at wearable technology. You guys have heard about hacking insulin pumps. You guys have heard about the capability to stop and mess around with heart rate monitors. For those of you that haven't, do a whole bunch of research on healthcare facilities and how they're actually having to deal with near-field communications, wireless communications, and the various other things that are out there. There's some actually interesting stuff that's getting built in. One of the things we were talking out in the village earlier on is the caps that they've now built that are able to actually do analysis on external brainwave. So now, talk about thought reading and talking about the ability to read thoughts. It's coming. At the moment, it's still millimetric away from the actual head, but it's getting to a stage where the further and further we go, we're actually able to measure more effectively and interpret that into something useful. Some interesting stuff on that one. So we started taking a look at what we could do to hack the humans. And thankfully, we took a good old look at Wikipedia and figured out what the hell the human body was made of. If you notice partway down here, the second one down, we've got carbon. Carbon is a very, very, very useful element when it comes to building technology. We all know it because we use it and we carry it around in our pockets. But if you start breaking it down to the molecular level, you can do some interesting stuff with it. And then if we take the logic flow about what we've done with building exoskeletons, endoskeletons, reanimating humans and all that kind of stuff, we really want to say, okay, how do we actually improve the human that we are? We talk about putting tech inside of us. Well, why not actually build that tech as part of us? This is what we looked at. Humans are 18% carbon. Carbon nanotube transistors have been around since about 98. And in essence, if you can control or manage or inject or influence those, we are nothing more than a walking computer. And then if we actually turn around and look at human nature itself, we get hacked on a daily basis. Think about germs. Think about catching a cold. Think about getting something worse than a cold. It's nothing more than the body basically being attacked. Justin and I were talking about a way to discuss this, about breaking the human body down to a network. Your cells, your blood, the flow, the network architecture. The fact that really we have 3 firewalls in the body. The barrier between the brain and the blood system, the barrier between our breathing and the blood system, the barrier between our stomachs and those systems. Those are nothing more than firewalls if you really think about it. But we all managed to get germs, we managed to get snuffly noses. So how the hell did those get in, and how can we use that to the best of our ability? We started taking a look at viruses fairly effectively. The ribonucleic acids, the ones that are actually sat there, those are the really core ones that get used very effectively when we talk about vaccines. You look at antivirus for all its ineffectiveness. It is nothing more in some ways than a vaccine. You take a look at humans and the arguably effectiveness or lack thereof of vaccines occasionally, and all they've done is they've taken something nasty, they've made it relatively tame, and then they inject it back in. Simplified down a bit. So can we do the same thing? And if we do, all your bugs belong to us. So how do we do this? Let's use nanotechnology. Let's take a look at the industry that's been out there for the last 15, almost 20 years. And then we'll break it down in this one. What is a nano architecture? How do you build these damn things? Is this science fiction? Is this reality? How do we deploy them? It's all real building this damn stuff, but how do we actually get it to do something? And then how the hell do we communicate with it? It's at a molecular level. You can't exactly jack it into an RJ45 as much as we'd like to be able to try to sometimes. You got to have this. This is my 10 seconds to actually have a drink of water. For those of you, by the way, that want to take pictures or want a copy of the slides, hit me up afterwards. I'll make sure. Well, Adrian's videoing the damn thing, for crying out loud. So you can always get it from him. But if you want a copy of the slides, hit me up afterwards. I'm pretty sure I can get a civilized version of these. So, let's start with the simple questions. What is it? How the hell do you build it? How do you program the bloody things? How do you control them? And then, obviously, how the hell do you deploy them? So, nanotechnology. How many of you guys are familiar with nanotech and nanoarchitecture? All right, so we'll have a quick A and B on this kind of thing. I'm keeping it high level. So, 1 nanometer in diameter, about the size of a couple of atoms, give or take a little bit. Strength, really strong bloody things. Hardness, ridiculously hard. Thermal properties, pretty amazing. Make it hot, does one thing. Make it cold, can do something completely different. Influence it with other kinds of electromagnetic fields, and you can get it to do some pretty amazing things, which we'll go through, which is why we're looking at using them. The nice thing about them at this day and age is we can make them into complex systems. Got some nice screenshots of it.
These are carbon nanotubes?
Yes, I got some slides in a second. Look, carbon nanotubes. Growing carbon nanotubes. So the nice thing about them these days is, exactly to Frank's point, it isn't just a single molecule of a carbon, a nanotech, and basically a carbon molecule. You can grow them into tubes, which, if you look at this top left-hand side, is a carbon nanotube farm. Now, back in '98 all the way to the early 2000s, building these things was very complex and pretty bloody expensive. And, as you can imagine, they're a pain in the ass to try and manage and to deal with. Well, for the last 15 plus years, we've been making it easier, cheaper, and simpler. And if you look at the size and the scale of those damn things, they're pretty small. And if you look at the architecture as to what you can build with them, you can do some pretty interesting things. Let's separate fact from fiction on this one, which is kind of a fun thing to do. The nanobot in this realm, not the realm of science fiction and what was that, G.I. Joe? Where the nanobot, I mean, they ate Paris, which is never a bad thing to do. Yeah, we'll nail a few of these. Big Hero 5 and the carbon-based nanotech, yeah, we're not quite there yet. The same thing with Honey, I Shrunk the Bloody Kids. Yeah, well, that doesn't happen quite the same way either. Transcendence was an interesting one. We're actually, what, 5-10 years away from being able to upload consciousness? I think last I saw it was 20 years, and because of the advances in tech now, we're about 5 to 10 years away from being able to potentially upload consciousness. So that really makes life interesting. And I'm looking forward to that, to be perfectly honest. Number one, I'm getting old and grey. And number two, I am so looking forward to screwing around with people. I mean, talk about ghost in the machine at that point in time. So, how do we build them? Modified DNA structures on this one. So the whole concept here is you can build a carbon nanotube farm. Then you've got to actually implant them. Then you've got to actually architect and build them onto something. We've got a couple of structures in a few more slides' time. What you can do, and what they're actually doing now, is they're adhering, or adhesively adhering, whichever way you want to look at it, making the two molecules attract of carbon nanotecture, carbon nanoarchitecture, and those nasty things like avian bird flu. So now I'm able to actually have a transport mechanism, avian bird flu, which can break the blood barrier, and I've also got carbon architecture, which can do similar things under certain circumstances. The bacterial base. So I can basically use the microorganisms that we allow into our body now as nothing more than my platform to move my architecture in and out. Same thing we do on a network. When we piggyback off of something, we're doing nothing more than using its transport and its authentication into a computer or a server to bring our payload. Exactly the same concept. And then we have the assemblies. So you can't exactly, as I said, jack an RJ45 into one of these things to actually program it and tell it what to do. But you can do some other fun things. You can actually embed programming into the carbon machines. We've got some interesting slides in the next couple of slides on this one. How far along are we? This was actually taken under a, basically as it says, EPFL's laboratory took these images from carbon machines, carbon nanotube machines. So now you're teaching the machines how to do basic math, how to do basic English, how to do basic, I don't know, assembler language. You're also teaching the machines from our standpoint to take what we consider a language and accept it in an electromagnetic frequency. So how do I go from our world into the molecular world? I embed it in a wave. It gets absorbed, it gets accepted, and now I've managed to program something. Depending upon how you build your carbon nanotube machines depends upon what you can do with them. They can be metallic, they can be attractors, they can be semiconductors. If you do a narrow band, in other words, a long thin tube of architecture, and you apply a single layer behind it, you can actually have it swim with the bloodstream. So now I have a transport mechanism. And the other thing that's useful, as we were talking about, so back in the year 2000, give or take a bit, it was about $1,500 a gram for these things. They were both expensive and a royal pain in the ass to manufacture. You fast forward to now, you're looking at a couple of dollars per gram. Part of the reason for this has got nothing to do with the healthcare and medical side of the world. It's the fact that they're bonding this stuff into all sorts of other applications. We'll cover those at the end. One of the biggest ones that we tend to find more in the commercial world is in jet engines. The reason we have much more effective and much more efficient jet engines are those blades can be made lighter, thinner, smaller, and much more efficient by the application of carbon nanotubes. At a molecular level, you can now smooth out the metallurgy to make it more efficient. So we're making more of these things, and now we're starting to put them into the healthcare field. I already took my drink while I was talking, so we'll move on. So what do we do about them? How do we encode them? How do we actually do something on these ones? Well, you do your research, no different than we do when we look at hacking anything else. The IoT village, the hardware hacking side of things, all of the lockpicking guys and everything else. We do our research, we do our schooling, and we figure out how to get in. In this case, we pick on either GE's nanotechnologies or some of the DNA computing companies. The nice thing about DNA, as it says on that, it has an amazing storage capacity, and you can do both molecular level and component level. So you can blend the human stuff that we need to get through those blood barriers and the electronics that we want to deliver our payloads. But what we want to be able to do is take an easy route. Let's be perfectly honest. Rather than actually having to build an application, we'll wait for the healthcare mentality to build it for us, and then we'll just piggyback off of it and see what we can do, which is where we look at hacking the code. And there's a couple of different capable logs on it, and you guys can do the research on this one. There's a language, Verilog, which actually goes through and describes a circuit function. So we are down at circuit level. We're memory level and below. Because these things are still relatively simple, you can't exactly drop some C code into it and go, let's see what it can do. That shit ain't going to work. What you can do is at a component level, instruct each one of these nanotubes to be what you need it to be. Are you a capacitor? Are you an attractor? Are you the swimmer? Are you the guy with the payload? Are you the guy that's actually going to destroy, or all sorts of other things? Now, the nice thing about it, I've got a couple of screenshots in this one, is that we can actually put a constraining file in place. So we can do all of the coding and the programming that we need in a language in a way that we understand. Some screenshots on it. Cello actually has a really, really nice way of laying this out. Again, if you are interested in this, do a little bit of research on it. It's kind of fun. Set of algorithms, Verilog text. Cello designs a circuit, draws up the circuit, and then you've got to figure out how to actually get it into something. I love this one. So here it is. This is where we take standard code that on the left-hand side we've built. Specific code that says, hi. It parses it, it synthesizes it, it assigns the gate flow and the gate logic, and then it basically drops it into the inputs in a frequency range that the carbon nanotubes can understand. So we've taken a program on the left-hand side that says, hi, carbon nano architecture, attach yourself to E. coli. It's pretty much a simple piece of code as that. You deploy the code, you have Cello and a couple of other programs encode it, do it as a frequency range, and then you're able to actually replay that against, in this case, it wasn't inside a body, but it was against basically a test subject, I will call it for that one. Now, I've obviously built the code, I've deployed it into my test tube or my Petri dish, but I've actually got to deploy the stupid thing. This would be the nice way to do it if it was that simple. Unfortunately, it isn't. However, that is relatively simple. Those are nanobots. Top left-hand screen, those are actual carbon nanotube architectures swimming. They've been given a set of instructions to swim up the bloodstream. And that's exactly what they're doing. As you can tell, the tail, that little flappy thing at the end of it, is acting, as we do in the natural world, as basically an oscillation machine. So you've given it a set of frequencies to oscillate at, and it moves up the tunnel. Kind of fun. On the bottom right-hand side, we gave it a set of instructions as well. Simple instructions, simple basically encoding the difference between certain chemicals. So if you look up what they're doing in the nice side of the world, they are sending certain in certain instances, they're actually sending these after cancer cells, which is freaking amazing as far as I'm concerned. The ability to actually pinpoint. So no longer do you have to basically dose yourself up like an atomic bomb every 5 minutes. You can send these little critters in, and you can do a much more pinpoint type of attack against individual cells. Now that's great if you leave the programming that way. But then you bring some bugger like me in who goes, oh, let's go after something other than cancer cells. We'll have that conversation in a minute. Let's get rid of some of the myths, although some of these have now changed courtesy of some more research I've done. Drinking tainted water won't actually make you infected with nanobots just yet, which is a good thing because they've got nanotechnology into the food system these days, in a lot of the packaging, in a lot of the linings, not necessarily these kind of bottles, but the types of bottles that we use and we drink, we're now starting to build that in. It can't yet get through the gut and the amazing amounts of weird and wonderful things that we have in our stomachs. Thankfully, that's acting as still a fairly decent barrier. Breathing impregnated air supply. At the time of writing, that was fairly true. That as you breathe in, obviously all the nice broccoli-looking things inside the lungs acts as some really, really nice filtration systems. Unfortunately, at the moment, it's looking like we can breach some of that. We're not shrinking shit down, we're actually building it up. That's a huge difference on this one. The whole, Hollywood, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, I'm able to basically shrink a computer down. No. We're going back to the very, very basics. And we're building systems up, and we're building them up a little differently. And then from a timeline standpoint, we're a long way to go, absolutely. But the fact that we've got swimming things, the fact that we can bind them to all sorts of interesting technology, and the fact that we can actually give them some fairly basic instructions, we're actually getting there. There's some fairly cool stuff that's coming out in the next 5 to 10 years. So, what are we actually going to go after? Well, we'll pick on healthcare because they're always fun to break. You look at the positive side, the ability to deliver targeted drugs efficiently and effectively, focused therapies, the ability to actually do much more effective diagnostics, the ability to actually do all of basically the antimicrobial techniques. There's some pretty awesome stuff. And now the dental boys have gotten hold of it as well. To look at any kind of reconstructive, any kind of preventative. There's some pretty awesome stuff they're looking at doing on this one. All right, pause for a second. I get to drink, and I get to thank Adrian actually for recording all of this. Thank you, Mr. Adrian. Okay, back to science. So now we get nasty, because the cat's airplane mode's enabled. I have no clue what time it is. Now we get nasty. This is a hexametric ring, as it says. It has 6 stations. So for those of you that are used, how many of you guys are used to writing viruses and Trojans and that want to admit to it in a public forum? We'll hold on to that for a second. Typically when you have that, you have a set of building blocks. No different than if you're going to run a payload. You have a payload that goes in and says, am I breaking Windows or Linux? You have a payload that says, how am I getting in? You have a piece of the code that says, who the hell am I talking to when I've got to something interesting? And then you have a piece of it going, how the hell am I going to communicate when I find what I want? No different than when you're building this. We have our keys, the recepting binders. In other words, when I inject this into a human, is it going to accept it or is it going to reject it? Those are nothing more than my crypto keys. That's basically my certificate. Does the body allow it or not? In this case, it does. We have our transport, an RNA bacteria. In this case, I'm trying to remember what the heck it was. I think it was something nasty like avian bird flu that we took. We have our bypass tools. So the body is actually pretty effective sometimes. The immune system goes, am I going to allow you in? In this case, the ribozyme in there goes, oh, absolutely, I'm perfectly nice, I'm wonderful. No different than if you're doing an attack against a company and you use port 80 to go inbound and outbound. Nobody filters on port 80 because everybody needs to get to the internet from the office. This is exactly the same concept. We have the reporting tool. Well, it's no good dropping something molecular in if you don't know what the hell is going on when you've dropped the stupid thing in. So it has the ability to communicate externally, again, in this case using frequency modulation. We have our payload, which is the drugs. And then we basically have the decoys, which is the endomosome disruptors. So again, the body, even though the body's allowed you in past the firewall and the IDS and the IPS, to some degree the body's still keeping track of you. You are a foreign object inside the body. So occasionally you have to have decoys. In the world I work to, we call it deception. In the world of this work that we call it to, it's a nice endosome disruptor. So, oh, there you go, it was bird flu. So, if I put this all in English, we took bird flu, we bound it to multiple nanotubes, we told the body, don't worry, it's perfectly acceptable, no problems, just let it in, it'll be perfectly happy. In this case, it was injected. We obviously have the propulsion systems, we have the ability to track where it's going, we've obviously got the decoys so that it can escape where the hell it needs to go, and in the case of being something nice, we have a drug to deliver to a cancer cell. Kind of nice, kind of altruistic, kind of a wonderful thing to do. But if you're somebody like us occasionally, you go, hey, if I change the frequency, and I change the frequency modulation, which means I can adjust the programming, I can send it to basically go after red blood cells instead. So I kill all of your red blood cells in your body. Nice little thing to do. The upside of that is it's still hard to do it. The downside of it is the technology to do this costs about $100. And most of it was sitting on that table in the IoT space. It's all it takes to encode the body. This is a set that was put together back in 2013. We actually replicated and did some other stuff. This is molecular level communication. So this isn't wireless, this isn't near field, this isn't anything else. This is basically communicating, in this case, using smell molecules. So at a molecular level, you're able to encode, well, if you really want to be blunt about it, you can encode whatever the hell you want to smell. But you're encoding molecules that can be ingested, that can be put into the system for about $100, plus the 2 pieces of software and a nice frequency modulator. So what do we do about it? Well, do some research. If you guys are interested in this stuff, again, this is kind of crystal ballish because we're 5-10 years out to some of this stuff, but some of it, as you can see, we've had some fun with doing already. Research the institutes. Do a whole bunch of looking on this one. Take a look at the communication forums. You know, these days we're still focused on, what, 802.11, A, B, C, N, and P now, isn't it, I think? Is there any other letters of the alphabet I've missed? G. Oh, God help, I forgot. Yeah, and N. Did I say N? All right, G, you're right. Look at the industries that we've done, and then start taking a look at the molecular level. There's some interesting discussions going on about, you know, where IT and where IT security is going. And there's always the spaces, and there's always the tech that we do that still requires that nice rack of equipment, but at some point in time, that nice rack of equipment is going to change, and we're getting down to the molecular level, which is where we start to see changes as humans. Do some research on that. It's a fun little field to mess with. Obviously have some fun at GE's expense. I do on a regular basis. I have a nice little stack of cease and desist letters from them. Nanotech and food and agriculture. So this is the list of where agriculture, food, and supplements are going or have gone. So again, this is not the stuff of science fiction. This is the stuff of science fact. The ability to basically, in agriculture, instead of spraying the living heck out of the land, to deploy it at a molecular level to adjust the code inside the plant. So this is no different than our wonderful friends at Monsanto and others do at that level. Now, we all know how wonderfully we feel towards those guys, you think of the shit they're going to do with this. Not that I'm advocating to burn the building down, but I'm about one step away from it. The food processing. Milk in its normal natural form should not be able to sit in the fridge for several weeks. Vegetables should not be able to sit out there for several weeks without rotting. We're getting to the stage now we start adjusting at this at the molecular level. Your milk's going to last for bloody 12 months for crying out loud, let alone the fact that the packaging that has it has this molecular architecture. And so there's all sorts of interesting stuff here. Not sure I like much of it. And then the supplements. There's some positive stuff to that. The ability to actually ingest something that is much more targeted. Obviously, research. Most of the stuff that was done here was done independently. I have worked with a number of the institutes and a number of the basically facilities as we've gone through this to go, hey, have you thought about this? And they went, oh shit, we didn't think about that. Help more and more of these guys actually figure out what the hell we're doing. Easy enough to do. How are we doing time-wise? A couple more minutes? Oh, awesome, cool, yay. So from the standpoint of what can we do, obviously, if you guys are interested in this, start communicating, start researching, start putting your own papers together, and start getting up on stage and saying, here's what I'm working on at the moment. Take a different tact, go mess around in the ag industry, go mess around in the food industry. Can you not play with that, please? It's driving me nuts. Thank you. What does it mean from the human standpoint? Well, if this goes well, it's great. There's a whole bunch of research into Alzheimer's. There's a whole bunch of research into all sorts of other biomechanical issues that we as humans manage to suffer. And this should help. If it doesn't go quite so well, it's going to be a bit of a mess. Technology, let's face it, hasn't exactly had an easy start in many different disciplines, IoT being the latest victim, shall we say. What I like about it very much so is that IT itself has definitely managing to cross the domains. I mean, it started off as it was just the computer guys, and then we started building it into all sorts of other domains. It's been built into science very, very effectively. It's been used by chemists and the biologists, but now we're building the architecture directly into their sciences. So there's some fun stuff there. So what do? Communicate. Effective communication. Collaborate is also another good thing. I'll be honest, I'm not the best at collaborating, as some people are very happy to attest to. I am the person that will regularly throw the Molotov cocktail at somebody that I'm not overly happy with rather than sit down in the boardroom. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I would actively tell you to communicate on this stuff. And then look at any alternatives. You know, all I've done here really is basically sit down and say, hey, this is where some of the challenges are. There's some great stuff coming up here, but there's some challenges. Great, find a fix for it. Do you build some kind of vaccination architecture? Do you think some kind of deceptive tech in it? And then how do we address it? How do we actually communicate with more and more of the research facilities? Again, get engaged. How do we educate them? How do we work with them? Or do we just hack the human and see what happens? Because obviously, that is always the fun part. So this is actually a construct that somebody is putting together for how to actually build the nanotube architectures. One of the interesting stuff they're looking at doing is gallstones and various other things. So you build these things into a swarm technology. You have ones which guide, you have ones which manipulate, and then there are ones that they're building that have frequency generators. So as it gets closer to its target, it's able to generate the frequency to break up the damn gallstone. Some pretty cool stuff. But again, if it can break a gallstone, it can do all sorts of other nasty, nefarious things in the body if somebody like me gets hold of the code.
That'd be huge for like stroke patients and aneurysms.
Oh, I mean, it's great. I mean, the upside of this stuff is phenomenal. But my biggest challenge is, like a lot of other stuff that we seem to have done in the last, 20, 30 years, we've been messing extensively with computers, is it feels, again, like we're charging in blindly. We're looking at the positive stuff, which isn't a problem at all, but we're tending to forget all the negative side. Not necessarily negative side of it, all of the... Yeah, there we go. Perfect way of putting it. All the unintended... Yeah. which is no different than we've done with so much other stuff. I mean, the ability for insulin pumps to be carried around by people is amazing. But then the fact that we leave the bloody things wide ass open to attack is a huge unintended consequence. Until some bugger goes, hey, look what I can do, and somebody goes, gadunk. Not pretty. It'd be nice not to have that happen in this instance. Because the best case is pretty freaking awesome. The ability to target, the ability to mess around with blood clots. I mean, you look at how many patients come out of surgery, will then suffer or have suffered blood clots or wherever else like that. I took a nasty fall. I was in Barcelona last week. Took a nasty fall in Barcelona and managed to knock myself out for about 30 seconds. It was quite fun. Came to and there's some nice men in orange poking and prodding me to make sure I was still focusing around. I've now been told I'm not allowed to bounce around. There's some weird shit going on up here. So it'd be nice to actually get whopped with one of these things and go, woohoo, I'm all good. But at the same time, knowing me, I'd be sitting there going, hey, what can I do with myself? Yeah, it ain't pretty, let's face it, it's me. Parasite removal, neuron removal, I mean, there's all sorts of crazy shit that's positive. And then you also take another step further. You know, how many of us think in 10 or 15 years' time when your telephone rings that you will actually pick it up with a hand and answer it? Or at what stage are we going to be at where it's either embedded tech or the tech has got to such a stage where it's on a lens inside our eye or it's a direct neural feed? Amazing capabilities, especially if we start looking at the ability to build it out this way. But the consequences of a room full of us going, hey, look at what we can do to this shit, is slightly terrifying. So how do we get ahead of this game? How do we educate and how do we get people to communicate effectively on this one? Because the worst case scenario gets really freaking nasty. Now, there are some arguments as to our current state of government as to whether something like this would be an effective change in policy, shall we say. And the fact that we all we all sit behind skiffs. I mean, those of us that have worked in those kind of facilities is like, nice big, not necessarily metal box, but we'll use some nice big metal box, all the shit get left outside and the human walks inside. Well, now the human is nothing more than a walking USB stick at the end of the day. We've done research with cockroaches. We can actually store 50 gig on a cockroach. It's freaking amazing. And if you build near-field communication into a cockroach and deploy them into a data center, good luck securing that shit. Last time we tried it, we walked out with 450 gigs worth of data. So this is no longer science fiction. Yeah, we did pretty. We actually dropped 20 in and we got 450 gigs worth of data out. It was like, woohoo! The biggest challenge for me, and this is not a US-centric thing, this is a very much global-centric thing, is we will weaponize this. We are amazingly good at shooting ourselves in the foot as not just a society, but as a human race, which is why part of me has given up on humans, to be perfectly honest. Because we'll go, hey, look at what we can do with this, and then we'll lose control of it. Because if we make a nuclear weapon, which we also lose those things, this shit's small. You know, there's lots of them. I don't have hair on my head, let's face it. There's lots of them that fit on a human hair. We can't find nuclear weapons. How the hell are we going to keep control of this shit? Now, the interesting is, as technology gains an upper hand, there is an interesting argument to say, not a bad thing. I'd love to have those debates. Those are fun debates to have. And then we start taking a look at how our evolution goes. Where do we go? Do we now go more to a carbon-based architecture? Interesting stuff on that one. And then you start taking a look at, okay, how do we influence these things these days? We influence through temperature. We influence through electromagnetic pulse. We influence through near-field communication. So the next time you walk through a TSA bloody not radar, a TSA flipping their nice little detector, you screw yourself over because you've got carbon architectures inside you. Not a pretty sight to be. Yeah, No shit. I love my little pat downs, they're so cute. I still have my TSA pre, but every single time, almost every single time I go through a TSA, they're like, you've been randomly selected. Aww. Yay, freedom fondle. They are fun in kilts. I've done that a few times. There are some very confused looks on their faces, bless them. So, concluding thoughts. There is this, unfortunately, potential. It is really, you know, my frustration is we sat down, Jesse and I sat down, I don't know, early mid-2000s and went, hey, you can hack agriculture, and by the way, here's what we can do with cars. 10 years later, hacking cars is a thing. I'm like, great, well done, boys. We obviously did the same thing with planes, as that's spread all over Google, for crying out loud. But before it got spread over Google, we spent 5 to 6 years trying to talk to the industry. Like many of us in the industry, how frustrated do we get that our own sphere of influence doesn't necessarily always listen to what we're trying to do them until the last moment or until shit's gone too late. That's fine when a firewall fails, but when you've got shit like this embedded inside of us, I'm not sure I want to get to a point of failure before we actually decide to do something about it. Because quite honestly, I'd rather avoid this. I don't mind if this happens. I'm on the record for this one. So, we do have the opportunity to influence change. As a race and as a society, we have the capability to change. We've done some amazing freaking things. We've also done some dumb as a box of rocks shit too. We, as the guys standing up on stage, also have the ability to teach and to help educate and to help get people to think better than we can, for want of a better way of putting it. My job is nothing more to make sure that the people, the rugrats that are younger than me, come up better, faster, and smarter than I do. And the rest of us should feel the same way. This isn't protecting the frickin' information, this is giving it to somebody else so that when I croak, somebody else can carry on the fight. It's as simple as that. Or, as it says on the last point, we do have the ability and the time to prepare for this. So, closing slide. We do have a hell of a community. It can be a little disjointed at times and a little challenging, but use it. And the reason I say that is I run into so many individuals that go, well, my boss doesn't listen, or my CEO doesn't listen, or my CXO doesn't listen. Reach out to the community and help, and have them help you understand how to talk to people. Or, worst case scenario, we dox your CEO, he realizes how bad it is, and then he'll listen to you. It's always different ways to do it. Obviously, to our wonderful hosts, thank you very, very much for having me here, despite the craziness and the fun stuff. Obviously to Calvio for letting me stand up on stage and cause chaos and mayhem. EFF for always putting up with me. Eddie for everything. And then obviously, as the last thing says, get out, go have fun, and make a damn difference. Guys, last slide. Thank you very, very, very much. Almost last slide. Any questions from you? Yeah. All right. Am I good for questions? I'll do questions while we line up the next person. Couple of minutes. Go for it. Good question. Oh, I know exactly what. Yeah, I know exactly where you're going on that one. I haven't done the studies on it. I have done enough research to say that they are working towards being able to influence that. Yes. But at the moment, my understanding is no.
Can they self-replicate, or is it going to be manufactured on the outside?
Manufactured on the outside at the moment. From a self-replication standpoint, you actually can build a nano. So there is the ability to build what's known as a nano factory inside. So a nano factory takes natural carbon, also takes the carbon that you can inject in. So it will take raw material, basically, and it will actually build the nanotubes. And they're getting to a stage, they're building the technology to get to a stage where it can literally be a self-replicating system.
But it takes the carbon out of that's in the...
There's two different ways. You put carbon in, but they're also looking at seeing if they can get carbon out. Yes. There's some really freaky stuff going on, and there's still a long way doing it. It's them throwing a crystal ball down the line to see where they can take it. Yeah, but that's not there yet. To make that very, very clear. But the discussions have obviously been had, because it's, okay, if I can get something into you, not only how can I get it to replicate, but also how can I get longevity out of it? I don't just want to inject you now and have something that works for a little bit. How do I have it so you literally have a continual health monitor inside of you that does nothing more than does some level of self-repair? There's a lot of discussions around it. There's a shit ton of really cool white papers about it, but it's still very much on the theoretical side of the world.
I was also just thinking of corpses that have been infected with it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's all sorts of shit that's got to be figured out. Go for it, and then I'll come back to you.
Have you guys had a chance to look at how some of this carbon nanotube research would now be affected by the recent improvements with CRISPR? So like now you basically do CRISPR gene editing, Walmart willy-nilly, right?
Yes. Yeah. There has been. I haven't done much on that one, to be perfectly honest. I've kind of more been focusing on this side of things because it's fun and it's interesting. I got to be perfectly honest. But I know, again, there's some people out there. Again, do the research. There's some amazing research papers out there on this stuff. Go for it. So anything that's really, really nasty and good to self-population. So if you look at vaccines, if you look at how some of the vaccines are deployed, they're taking that same methodology, yes. Yeah. So there's no division inside that cell. Once it's actually there, it's there. There's no division inside the cell. So once they've basically, done the petri dish creation of that, what the hell am I doing here? Once they've done the petri dish creation of that, it stays as a static, one cell equals 1 set nanoseconds. There's no self-replication. Again, they're looking at what they can do and how they could do something in the future. So no, it's definitely not a scatter approach. Yeah, it's fairly tied. So, I will build a set of carbon architectures, and I will basically inject into a flu architecture, or a bird or avian or anything else along those lines. And then from that point, I then have in the process, I can see how much is bound. Is it 50%, 60%, 80%, 90%? And at a percentage threshold, I know I'll just inject. So does that make sense? No problem. Any other questions before I bug out of here? All right, awesome. Thank you very, 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 very much. Enjoy. Hopefully that was fun.
Thanks, Chris. No, taking care of that, but then you could also false memory. Yeah, politicians. And that was the nice one. All right, I'm assuming that. I'll come say goodbye. So, got more people coming in the room. Obviously, you're about to give stuff away. Yay, stuff! So I think we have a combination of prizes and a raffle. Do you have your raffle tickets? I never got one. Oh, is Liz not?
Oh, hi. You got all this stuff. Everybody know where promotion is. Yeah. What's that? But you've got a snort piggy. He's got a snort piggy. I know, right?
He's got a hat.
Yes. This
It's like 2 sets of 2, so 2 separate sets.
Do you want to read off of it?
If you want to, but
we'll do that big Hello. Oh my God. What did you do? Why is this so loud? Hello, friends.
Why did you say it was me? Chris handed it to me.
So do you have your computer? Yeah, so this is Glenn Tile, and if we could just give him a big hand today. He did a lot of work for us on the CTF today, and we really appreciate it, and we hope that, how many first-time CTF players did we have today? For the first time? That's fantastic.
Okay.
Great.
I guess you're not going to plan on recording this?
I'm not me, but...
Yeah, you don't need to. Don't worry about it.
So I'm going to turn it over to Lynn Howell, who's going to run through the CTF and
Perfect.
help you out.
Thanks. Perfect. Good enough. Hi, everybody. Thank you for the ones who did participate in the CTF. Hopefully, I know that my style of puzzle is not necessarily your run-of-the-mill CTF puzzle, and I had a lot of fun times with the participants that did show some effort there. So, as always, give yourselves a hand for the participation. Thank you very much. A couple of stats first. There were 1,760 points available. We had 29 teams that actually showed up and did something, 55 that were registered. 15 of the teams actually solved a challenge which was equal to or more than 100 points. So anything that wasn't a trivial challenge. So that's actually pretty good. 65 individual flags were taken. So without further ado, let's go to the winners. In third place, we have Cyber Monkeys. Actually, I'm going to go backwards. Never mind, because we have 3 prizes that are from Hack 5. We've got a Wi-Fi pineapple, a land turtle, and a rubber ducky. And in first place, they get their choice of the 3, and that is team. So come up here and grab your prize. Give them a hand. And sorry if I didn't pronounce that correctly. Hey, didn't break the scoreboard, so we're going to call it a win.
Okay. Yeah, they want the pineapple.
They want the pineapple. All right. And in second place, we have the Anti-Cyber Squad. Yeah. All right. Give my hand.
Rubber ducky.
Rubber ducky. Take that home and definitely don't pwn anything at Purdue, okay? Perfect. Excellent. And then third place, Cyber Monkeys. Cyber Monkeys, come up and grab your... All right. Excellent. Land turtle. Popping shells. Awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and give a quick rundown of the challenges that were solved. We'll start with crypto. This was the first was just Rot 9. If you don't know about rot13.com, you do now. The second one, referee. Referee was a reference to a Playfair cipher. It's a Playfair cipher keyed with Indy. And so if you use Rumpkin and put in Indy there, you get the right answer, which is make sure you always remember to play fair, I believe was the answer there. Russia. So one of the things that I think is this is just an editorial, but I think that we use a lot of ciphers and a lot of things in our industry that we don't actually understand. And so I want you guys, even if you don't see this, I want you to go through the math and try to understand how RSA actually works. Because the point of RSA is that if you have I gave you N, right? I gave you the RSA modulus. And you can actually trivially go through the math, factoring N, and then finding the encryption and decryption exponents. Because it's literally just a little bit of factors, and you do the Chinese reduction algorithm on it, and so you can figure that out quickly. But seriously, I would suggest that even if you want to just go through this challenge and try it on paper, if you're at all interested in crypto, it will make you understand RSA a whole lot better about why it works.
Can you give them just a minute to take it?
Yeah, by all means.
How did you make the jump from Russia to RSA?
The 3.
It was supposed to be Russia.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And the question mark was because, there's always been a question about whether RSA had a big part of the Russians too. So it was sort of a double entendre. It was a double entendre.
It's not right.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So the programming, guys had a lot of fun with these ones. The first one, I taught you guys how to play video poker. So now you all want to go to Vegas and make millions of dollars. There are a couple of different ways to solve this because I let you seed the random number generator. So my personal solution, how I solved it, was with keeping 2 concurrent connections to the server and essentially going one hand ahead, so you knew what the future was going to hold. So you should know whether to bet all your money or not all your money. It's
solution was able to solve it in 1,006 rounds. If you did better than that, good on you. But I didn't do anything. I did it very naively. I never drew any cards. I just either won or didn't. So you can optimize the crap out of this solution, but it just works good enough. Decode. Sorry guys, I'm not going to waste the solution because this was actually a pretty cool. Back me up on that, Reagan. I shouldn't waste the solution. So you may see another version of that come up at another con, Circle City Con again soon.
Where is that at?
I've heard of it. It's yes, Chicago. Burbsec, really south. Got it. And then we had a number of lulls. Stranger Things, a few of the teams got this one. Essentially, the Stranger Things reference is the Upside Down, right, if you ever watched the show. And so it was legitimately just a zip file, which had been bitwise reversed. Anybody that saw the KP right at the end of the file would have been a clue as well. Do a quick Python or whatever just to reverse the file, unzip it, and there was the flag inside the zip file. Text me. This is pretty cool because this is actually a fully formed program, and so all you had to do was transcribe it into a file, download the emoji code compiler, compile it, and run the program, and it actually just printed out the flag. Actually, I can just show it to you real quick.
Oh my God.
So I'll just show you guys here. Let's see. I'm going to make that a little bit bigger. So that would have been miscellaneous. So yeah, so basically, like I said, this is just the contents of the text message. Right, and so you can just compile it with the emoji code compiler. Which puts it into emoji code bit code, and then you can see the flag there. So yeah, so it's a very interesting little thing, and thank you emoji for ruining programming language. And of course I can't. Cool. Well, that was cool. Pretty excited about what happened there.
What have you learned? Good job.
Oh, cool. My computer restarted because of a problem. I don't know who it was, but screw you guys.
Thank you, emojis, for ruining Perl.
Yeah, seriously, emojis again ruin everything. So there you go.
HDMI port
What's the correct emoji?
will cause a KP if you're like mid input.
Yeah, I guess I'm just the worst.
It wasn't me. I'm like way
I
over
don't
here.
believe you.
It's like physically impossible unless they're nanobots.
Shit. Hate it when they have.
All right, well, I'll tell you what, I'll raffle a thing.
Yeah, raffle a thing off.
Who's got a, get out your ticket.
It's kind of bad.
And 262213.
What's the prize?
You'll find out when
Mind
you
your
win.
business.
You're getting it anyway.
262213. Nope. Nobody? 262230. Really? 262215. Is anybody looking at their ticket?
Not 2, 3, 4.
What do you have?
2622115.
Hey.
No, it's not going to take it up.
Come collect your Snorty with the black hat.
This is pretty awesome.
This was a black hat, the little black hat from DerbyCon. Snorty did a DerbyCon thing. Yeah. Okay. Tell me when you're ready. I'm going to do one more.
I would love to.
262182. No. 262211. No. Oh my God. 262253.
Wait,
Do you have it? Yeah.
Oh, thank God.
Okay. You get a DerbyCon bag with an in-game bottle opener.
What a college.
While we're on the DerbyCon thing, I'll do. You gotta do one more.
Yeah, of course.
262191. 187.
No? Okay, all right.
186.
Okay, that's not random.
161. No? No 161? 162?
Bat search is very inefficient.
Did I already read these? 168.
Hey, there's one. Somebody figure out the operational complexity of bat search for me, please. Yeah, there you go. No, Bat Cat. I'm not going to ruin it for anybody who didn't actually talk to Bat about this. So, moving on. Yeah. So, the reversing challenges. So, the first one was fairly simple in terms of the scope of reversing challenges. It was just a double table lookup with an XORed string. So there were a couple of different ways you could either brute force it throughout, by looking through an IDA or Hopper or whatever, or Anger is actually a really good tool to solve this. So if you haven't looked at Anger before, it's a Python-based reverse engineering platform that would be really useful. And also, I'm pretty much on the side of Anger for all the time. Library book. This was kind of the crazy pants of all the reverse engineering challenges. We had one team that was solved. Was anybody here the one that solved it? Cool. But basically, it was a packed binary where it was with the BSI packer, but we're at BSides Indy. But if you'd ever seen a packed binary before, it's really suspiciously looks like UPX. So if you just replace the BSI with UPX, you can unpack it with the normal standard command line tools. But the binary still crashes because everybody always forgets to return your library books. I removed all the return instructions from the binary and replaced them with NOPs. Because you always forget to return your library. Anyways, so basically the easiest way to find that pattern is to look for all the leave instructions, which are at the end of a function, and then just patch back in the returns, at which point you could just run the binary and get the flag in the standard out. So I would encourage you to go ahead and try that one to go with your sed foo if you want to try that at home later. But that's the basic idea there. Yep, and you can see that there's a screen cap from IDA where at the end of the main function, it just sort of kept running into the next function. That's why if you were looking at it in GDB or something, it would all of a sudden be in a way different function than you thought should be executing because it would just keep running down the end until something went wrong. That's it. So any other questions about this? I know a couple of you solved the box problems there. So big hand to Reed for bringing those in for us. Those were awesome. So any last issues? Any last questions? All right, great. Thanks a lot for your participation, and I'll see you guys at Circle CityCon.
Okay, have a couple more prizes. 262206 and 195.
Yeah, good job.
Yes, no. 263. I'm just gonna keep calling them out. You can sit here all day. 255. 255. 255. So this is a bag of stickers. We have Tim here.
Yeah.
He makes all the stickers for all the cons, which is great. And what he's done is compiled a bag of all of his stickers that aren't full of bad language. And he 3D printed like a fidgeter spinner, so it's awesome. Yeah. Thank you, Tim. Thank you. 262255. Did I? Okay. 222. 222. Yeah. 222. Okay, well, I just feel like the ball cap is like a thing. Dave, will you talk to us about prize 222?
Prize 222 is this badge. So this fun, cool badge was made in 30 seconds, right? So it's a Arduino Mini Pro. You can go in there. It's fully hackable. You can wear it. You can take. If you take it to another conference, did you win this?
Yes.
Oh, good. So if I catch you wearing this at another con, I'll have another secret prize for you. Oh, it's fully hackable Arduino, a lot of fun. And, final thing, it has a default message scrolling. And if you still have the default message scrolling, somebody else gets the prize.
Thank you, Dave.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Albert.
Thank you.
218. How's that both of you?
No, so I lost this, but then I found it.
What are you?
262 It's like when in public right at the beginning. I thought I lost it.
Wow.
Validation. Validation.
Okay, so you weren't paying attention. So Alien ball cap with the drink holder that you can put your Pepsi in. Thanks to Alien Ball for the donation. Yes. And Franklin, are you in the room? Could you come talk about this prize for 30 seconds?
Oh, it's in a plastic bag. Okay, I have this.
No, you didn't. We traded it out because it didn't fit.
I did not have this in a hard case. So this is the kit that we use for Friday. What's in here is basically an ESP8266 chip that is going to help you enable your the Internet of Things in your life. The chip is kind of breakout that they call Node MCU 1.0, and you can code it with Lua, or you can code it with the Arduino IDE. I just saw Paul somewhere. Okay, so this is really cool. We had a project on Friday where we were going to do some menus and have an up, down, left, right button. And Paul actually took and made a Wi-Fi scanner out of one of these. So these are very versatile kits that you can hook to Mosquito Daemon or Africa.
BSides Indy sweatshirt, like the one I'm wearing. Well, yeah. And so I decided that we should give it to somebody that seemed to sort of step out of their comfort zone today, because that's what we're all here to do. And we have a student here who is not a security student. She's actually a student of education, and her name is Katie. And I spent a little time with Katie today, and she picked her very first lock with DOS Man.
Yeah.
Woo-hoo! But she really came out of her comfort zone. So I think that's what it's all about. The way that our community can kind of grow is if we reach outside of ourselves into other areas where we think we may not have a place, but we really do. And we have a place in education, just like we have a place in healthcare. So. Yay!
Awesome.
With that, I'll just yell. This is Dave Schwartzberg. He puts a lot of hard. Oh my God! So we're gonna not do that right this second. We have 2 more raffle prizes.
No, I'm not gonna continue.
OJ, good memory.
So I run Circle
Want to do
City
sound check?
with a bunch of other folks. So it's going to be June 9th through the 11th at the Sheraton, which we're kind of downtown. And so we hope to see you there. Lintile's going to be doing CTO. We'll have talk tracks. We're going to have free trainings. CFP just closed, so we'll have those trainings posted here soon. So please be sure to sign up as soon as you can. And I think there will be like a little charge to reserve your seat. But if you come day of, there's seats available. You can sit your duff down and start hacking. I'm going to give 2 sets of 2 tickets away, so that you can bring a friend or someone who's not a friend. You just go, here you go, or you can sell them online.
That's what, a $300 value?
Each pack is around a $300 value when you buy a ticket at the door. So
the ticket gets you into the training also.
The tickets can get you into trainings day of, but you basically, if you have a ticket, you can purchase the $5 training fee to reserve your seat. You know, we want to make sure you're going to be there, not just go, oh yeah, I'll go to that, and then never show up.
Wait, trainings are only $5?
$5, yeah. The reserve seat.
Outstanding.
Yeah, and I mean, some of this is reverse engineering and forensics, some of the stuff you do in the CTF that you've been doing, so if you want to learn how to do some of that. Some of them, I think you even taught leadership through Legos once, didn't you?
I did.
Yeah, so it's good stuff like that. Jack Daniel once mixed drinks and ranted about security, I'm sure. So a lot of fun different types of trainings, from soft skills all the way up to really hardcore stuff that we all love doing. And some hard work. Welcome anyone to come to Circle City Con, but
OJ, thank you so much. That's so generous. Thanks.
Thank you, guys.
So, look at your tickets, and here we go. 262241.
I won.
you're not allowed.
262207.
This is for 2 tickets, right?
Yeah, this is for 2 tickets, and then there'll be another drawing.
Okay, 262270.
Oh, there you go. Dan the man.
Nice try, China. That's your response. Actually, you hang on to that. You hang on to the. Wait,
Something.
which one is that? 27.
Yeah,
Okay, you keep that.
thank you. Good.
Okay. Oh man, this is so stressful. It's like Wheel of Fortune. I'm finally ran away. 262202.
All right, guys.
Well, just when we thought it was over,
It's me.
BSides Las Vegas has just made an incredibly generous donation.
No kidding.
And I'd like Banshee to just come say it because I just can't.
Oh, it's you.
Surprise, so.
It's not me. It's you. Very cool.
Hi guys, ladies, gentlemen.
Yep.
So BSides Vegas has this, we do a donor drive every year. We don't charge entry. One of the packages is a Rock Plus package, which is basically a badge, a t-shirt, and meal tickets, 4 meal tickets for the event. So you don't have to worry about buying food because Vegas is expensive. We're also going to throw in 2 nights of hotel.
Oh, wow.
So all you have
That's
to
cool.
do is get yourself to Vegas.
Wow. That's really cool.
That's amazing.
That's really cool.
Banshee's also the president of the BSides board, so very generous of you. Thank you so much.
That's so cool.
All right, look at your tickets. 262206. Nope.
I know.
262275.
How about plus or minus 5 on the?
Plus or minus.
262238.
Oh, come on. Oh my God! Isn't this the youngest attendee? Nice. Do you have an age minimum? Oh, okay. Good job, James. Yeah, all right.
Yeah, okay. I need you to email me within the next 48 hours with your contact info, okay?
Come with me to Vegas, baby.
Nice win. Very cool. That's awesome. Wow.
Thank you, Banshee. Thank you so much. All right, without further ado, our closing keynote
Thank you.
speaker, Dave Schwartzberg.
Thank you, Bat. Recording? Sound check? Sounds good? So, BSides Indy, pretty badass, huh? Did you guys have a great time or what? A lot of fun. A lot of fun. We had a great time. So, today's talk is kind of had the theme of last year. There was an election. Somebody had a certain campaign slogan, so we kind of took it from this. And this talk originally was created with Chris Sistrunk and myself. So there's still going to be references to Chris, but he'll be here in memory, and like an imaginary Chris will be here, but I'll be playing him. So first quick introduction. You guys know me as Dave Heel Schwartzberg. There's my Twitter handle. I work for Mobile Iron and work in mobile security, but also helped create Hack for Kids back in 2014. And there's going to be some additional references to that. But everybody who's running on a campaign needs to have a slogan. So mine is, no child's email is left behind. They should all have their own server. So now I'll be acting in the part of Chris. Chris Sistrunk. He's a consultant, big SCADA guy, ICS, over at FireEye, formerly Mandiant, and also one of the organizer for BSides Jackson. And his slogan is, we're going to build a firewall. I'm going to make IT pay for it. Make SCADA great again. Tried to do my best, Chris, there. So in the spirit of us all being patriotic, technical, and security people, please chant with me. USB, USB, USB. Thank you for your participation. So now, why don't we just kind of cut over to STEM. So anybody here never heard of STEM before, knowing it is science, technology, engineering, and math? We've all heard of it. Good. Little background, most people don't know. It was started back in 1997 by the National Science Foundation, and there was a committee who voted that this is what they want to do to help educators be more collaborative on what they're teaching U.S. students, early childhood, middle school, college, because we were falling behind internationally when it came to these disciplines. About 13 years later, a group of people came together and said, we're missing something, art. So they created a website, STEAM, not STEM. And art's important. It absolutely is. Creativity is kind of like a foundation of what we do, and as humans. About 4 years later, Rob Furman from the Huffington Post wrote an article on, we need to include reading, which creates the acronym of STREAM, which is very interesting. But reading is also important. All these disciplines are very important. I'm not saying one is more important than the other, but I'm really here to focus on STEM. So is Barack Obama. So back in 2010, Barack Obama wanted to expand what we're doing with education, so that way there would be $250 million available to train educators and enable them to train future students, which is great. So when you have all these funds available, you could start to really do things, because we all know, even when we want to do our science projects, when we want to hack harder or just kind of learn how to code, there is a cost. There's a cost to get on the internet. There's a cost for equipment. It's not free. I'm going to read this one part that's bolded. So I think this is really kind of really represents and reflects what a lot of the people in this room kind of think and feel. So, paraphrasing, science, it is an approach to the world, a critical way to understand and explore and engage with the world, and then leave the capacity to change that world. What does that sound like? All right, we'll get to that in a bit. But very, very important. So how do we come up with this? So we hang out and Chris and I were just kind of talking about how we need to include hacking a lot more in some of the things that youths are doing. We believe that they're natural hackers for a variety of reasons. And so we wanted to kind of come up with an acronym. And we came up with maybe putting the H after the S, but SHTM, Your EM didn't seem like you could. Yeah, you could put another vowel in there, and we didn't think that would be appropriate. So then we thought, well, THS wouldn't also be a good choice. But so we came up with the H before the M, and now this is tricky. Is the H silent? Is it not? How do you say that, right? Is it STEM with a long H, and that sounds kind of creepy? Or are you clearing your throat? STEM. Excuse me. What do we want people to say? Yeah, STEM with an H. Yeah. So just pronounce STEM, or if you choose one of the other ones that you like, feel free. But we just decided that that seems to work the easiest for everybody. So what are you talking about, this STEM? This was one of Chris's slides. He likes doing impersonations. So we're going to present to you very quickly science, technology, engineering, and hacking and math. I think you guys saw that coming. But really, it's arguable. I've heard some arguments saying, well, you got all these other STEM disciplines, and hacking is different. It's not exactly the same approach as what you're doing with science, technology, engineering, and math. So it really doesn't belong. I mean, does anybody agree or disagree? I mean, we can be controversial about it. Right, maybe. But when you look at just, for example, science and math, what are they? Methodologies to solve problems, very simplistically, right? Methodologies to solve problems. And if you keep using those methodologies, hopefully you'll continue to solve some problems. Some of them might be more difficult than others. But when you look at technology and engineering, is that the same as science and math? No. It's applications of science and math. And what's hacking? Applications of STEM. Make sense? So what you're doing as a hacker, you have a process, you have a methodology. Sometimes you're making that up as you go along. But you're using that methodology to expand what you know about those other 4 disciplines. Make sense? Agree? Disagree? I'm open for comment. Okay. It's a nice response. Thank you for being kind. But if you seriously want to talk about that later, absolutely open for discussion. Because I don't want to stand behind something that I believe, and Chris feels the same way and strongly about, and if we're wrong, or if there's a way that we can make it righter, then I'd like to do that. And well, in the words of Russell Ackoff, the famous economist, doing things righter. So, quick overview of why we think this is important. First, we're going to have some reasons on why to include the H, or hacking, in STEM. There's a lot of hacking education going on. If anybody's like an old school hacker or can think back to when they were dialing up to a BBS, it's kind of tough to get into a crew, right? It was very different. A lot of this information was coveted. You couldn't just get it as freely as you can now. Got some case studies, and I want to talk about some challenges, going forward. So who here was like a technology hobbyist that turned this hobby into a career? Just a lot of you? Some of you still unsure? Right. The majority of the room. No different. I can go back to my TRS-80 Model 3, which I still have in my garage, or my my Apple IIe knockoff called the Laser 128, which broke the moment I opened it up. So, c'est la vie. But we started putzing around with the different equipment, software, hardware, what have you. We would try to find some of that secret knowledge and things like the special cookbook that's out there. Or you can see, like on the far right, kids, hackers, breaking things, breaking into banks, those damn hackers. Those kids are all the same. They're a problem. Got to get rid of them, right? And then there's also some of the ones that became professionals, right? Kevin Mandiant, right? From Mandiant, now over there at FireEye, so Big Uncle Kevin. And then Uncle Dave. Like, who doesn't love Uncle Dave? Great guy, great contributor to the community, another person who went from a hobby to a profession, and people like giving back to the community. So this is kind of a lot of us, right? But also the media has their say in things. If you can read that headline on the far left, if you can't, hackers can turn your home computer into a bomb and blow your family to smithereens. It's hard to say that without wanting to laugh. Who here has done that other than maybe CP? Right? It's ridiculous. Or whenever there's a breach, those damn hackers! The media loves this because it's like almost fictitious news sometimes, right? They don't check all their facts, and we just kind of keep banging our head against the desk saying, check your facts, get it right. And we're all not bad. I don't know if there's any bad people in this room. There might be. You're doing a good job covering it up. But we're really here to kind of promote things like innovation, right? Education, community. And then we got Mr. Robot. Who has not seen Mr. Robot? It's okay, a couple people. Why is it so popular? Because it's not like the movie The Net. It's actually something where they're using real tools, and it's a very honest portrayal of some of the hacker culture, right? Not 100% completely accurate, but it's also the consultants, professional hackers. So they're really kind of going to the source in order to communicate publicly kind of some of the things that we do on a day-to-day basis or just enjoy doing once in a while. What was that? Better than Scorpion.
You talked about consultants for Mr. Robot.
Well, we have one on staff.
Doesn't the mobile iron?
We have one. So there is somebody, he's a Michigan gentleman, James Pluff. He one of the people that was producing, and I might get the story a little wrong, but from what I remember him telling me, that he had an intern that he worked with. The intern, and he was teaching him InfoSec. The intern decided, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to go to Hollywood, and I'm going to help produce movies. They ran into each other in an airport and said, hey, we're putting this kind of cyber tech show movie together. Do you want to be a consultant? And it's kind of like when you run into a friend, it's very passing. You're like, ah, sure, give me a call. We exchange contact information. And James really was like, yeah, nothing's probably going to come out of that. But a month later, the gentleman contacted James, and his first year working as a tech consultant, just simple stuff like verifying that the use of certain technical terms are being used properly, coming up with some kind of creative hacks that kind of integrate into the show. And his first year, though, you kind of think, wow, this is really cool. Well, it was a startup, so they paid him with a T-shirt or sweatshirt, just kind of like yours, but it says Mr. Robot. It's pretty cool. But now the show's taking off and things are good. He still works at Mobile Iron. But I wasn't going to bring that up, but since you did, it's all good. Yeah, and James is so cool. He's a great guy. So, so we have the media, but there's also a workforce shortage, right? You know, a part of being able to work or be a part of the skilled labor force, you need education. You could start as a hobbyist. You could go to school. You can learn. I remember going to school. This stuff wasn't there. In college, it was only learning how to become a developer. There was no networking courses. There was no cybersecurity. And now we have that, at least in universities and somewhat in high schools. But lower level, it really depends on the budgets and the available funds within that district in order for them to teach, say, elementary or middle school kids any of these kinds of fun skills, or even to kind of mess around with a Raspberry Pi or an Arduino. But CSO is seeing that there's going to be about, I think it's the year 2020, 1 million open InfoSec positions. I think that's a global number. I don't think that's just the US. But that's a lot. That's not far away. How are these people going to get trained? We can't keep working as hard and fast as we do. We need to start to bring in some new people and train them. And at BSides Las Vegas last year, Swag was walking around interviewing some folks, and they're asking different practitioners of, like, what's a good way to approach this problem? And some people just, I don't have any idea. And it's a hard problem to solve. Educating the next workforce, getting those 1 million people employed. And so that's a bit.ly to the video if you want to watch it. So when we go to education, we look at kids. It's actually kind of playing the long game. There are people today that we can train, but if we start with some kids and those people that we can train today, it'll be a lot easier path. Don't we want to have like a smoother road to drive on rather than a less bumpy one that we keep hitting potholes with? So why kids? Well, first of all, they're very curious. Have you ever had a kid ask you a question and you give them an answer, and what's the first thing they say after that? Why? 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 And it's incessant, but as an adult, you kind of get it and you take for granted that you get it, but for them, the world is new and they're very eager to explore it. So, you know, it's a part of our responsibility to kind of get them through all those whys. I love the next one. They question authority. My kids love to question authority. In case I didn't tell you, I got 3 boys, ages 11, 9, and 5. And even the 5-year-old, you know, he stands up for himself, which he should. But when we're like, hey, it's time to, you know, take a shower and go to bed, nah, I'm going to watch YouTube videos. Maybe that's not the best way to question authority. But don't we do that today? Don't we look at whatever the government or some entity is doing and saying, you know, that's not probably the best way to do it for reasons of caring about people or just human rights. But we should continue doing that. We should never stop questioning authority, and neither should kids. But they should respect authority, and so should we. And they're darn persistent. Again, back to the why, but even when they're stuck trying to solve a problem, you ever see a kid trying to put a square peg in a round hole? They're not going to stop until they get pretty darn close, or you give them a cookie. Sometimes a cookie's the best way to go. But the persistence is also very important. Aren't we very much the same way? Right? How about their ability to innovate? Excuse me, I got a great example of that coming up. But if you give them something, we saw that today at the table in the next room. Gave some kids some electronics. Yeah, one of them picked his head up. And they just went and just started plugging things in, doing some stuff that none of us probably thought of before. And that's great. We want them to do that. Innovation is so important when it's done properly. But if we don't have people properly trained on what security principles and practices are, and when they do create new technology, IoT, they have to have those security practices in there. And if they're not doing it from the design, what do we have? IoT, excuse me. And they're also great social engineers. Have you ever had a kid say, well, I'll give you my example. So I'll have my son come up and say, well, I want to go to a movie tonight, and I'm going to go with my friends, and you know, his mom will be there. All right, what'd your mom say? All right, I'll be right back. She said to ask you. I said, okay. Well, and we go through the questions. Is your homework done, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then, of course, his incentive is to go to the movie. So what do you think he's going to tell me? Everything I want to hear. Yeah, homework's done. Well, they're always going to use that ability, excuse me, to tell us what we want to know, tell us what we need to hear to get to the next level. Are we any different as professionals? I'd say not. I mean, doesn't mean you have to be a liar, but what's a good social engineer? A liar that's not caught. So my kids have learned to be good social engineers. This is a great story. This is a really good story. I mean, aside from like starting this stuff at 3rd grade, this one young, this 5-year-old boy, while his dad was at work, wanted to use the Xbox. His dad works in IT, so of course, wants to have some tech laying around, and his kid, well, also his dad put a passcode on the Xbox, so his kid can't just use it any time of day. Makes sense. So what does the kid do? He uses his curiosity of punching extra codes and is persistent to not stopping until he performs a buffer overflow on the Xbox with the controller and gets right in. It's a great story. Find the video, and the interview kind of went like this. I wanted to play video games, so I kept pushing codes until I got in. Yay! So cute. Love it. Oh.
1, 4, 9, 2. Okay. And 1, 4, 9, 2.
Is it okay to share your password with people?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
Yeah.
You guys heard that, right? Is it okay to share your passwords? How many of you guys have users like that? They think it's okay to share their passwords. Or you can call them customers. But that's little Benny a couple years ago. Really didn't speak very much for many years, but whenever he went to go and unlock the tablet, he would always say the passcode out loud. You know, his incentive is to get in there, but it took about a year to teach him to say it inside his head. And then finally we got him to change the passcode. So now only Benny and I know the passcode, and it was really cute. And he's like, "Mommy, I'm not allowed to tell you the passcode." We had a conversation after that. Here's another really great story. So kind of back to Benny, though. You know, we do have people that don't put passcodes on their devices. They may have like company email. They may have something on there, like some files that maybe they do some like insurance inspections, and they went out to the field and took pictures of some really bad scenes, and this all should be really kept private. But their device could be easily broken into if it's an older version of Android. I think we also have somebody in an elected position that's using an older Android phone and does a lot of tweeting, which could be a problem. So here's another great story. So this is a story about Chris Sistrunk's son, who was learning how to use MIT Scratch. You guys know how to use Scratch? It's fun, even for adults. Simple way, it's kind of like Legos with some coding syntax. You don't have to be caught up on doing all the typing, but things snap together very nicely, and if they don't belong together, it just gives you a nice, pleasant beeping sound. So Chris's son had this Pong game that he made. But, you know, with his curiosity and innovative skills, he said, you know, every time player 1 or player 2 hits the ball, I want to make some random colors. I want to make it all psychedelic. I want the ball to go nuts. I think he even had some sounds that were going in there and getting louder and louder, driving Chris's poor wife insane slowly. The next thing was, he said, well, I want to win, so I'm going to change the rules. Every time I hit the ball, my paddle's going to grow 10 points in size, and every time player 2 hits the paddle or hits the ball, their paddle's going to shrink, making it harder and harder. But then he actually said, well, let's make the ball bigger, where it just kind of went back and forth making noise and just kind of stopped moving, and it was just this big psychedelic blob on the computer. Kind of cool. That's the innovation and curiosity. But being the 9-year-old that he is, what do you guys think he named his awesome Scratch program? Look at this. Look at the screen. Yeah, you all laugh, but are we any different? So why should we include hacking in education, right? I mean, you can kind of see it. Some of the kids who are able to have these resources available, they're really able to kind of explore and innovate and question authority and be social engineers and all that other good stuff. And there's a increasing number of organizations doing this, and this list is even just a very short list. My first introduction to something like this was DEF CON Kids, which later became Roots Asylum, which part of that kind of inspired me to create Hack for Kids, in addition to a lot of other reasons, kind of at least make a community of kids that have these similar interests and be able to share ideas and work together on stuff. And if you saw them earlier at the Snap Circuit table, they were having a great time putting batteries in series to give a propeller more power and kept shooting it into the ceiling. But that's creativity and innovation. It's pointless, but it's very creative. The other thing was there's cyber boot camps, there's Interrupt, but there's also like Hack Day Camp, which is international. So there's one in San Jose and then a couple other countries where people can go and bring their kids and have their Kid Hack Day. And then there's also the Cyber Patriot. Who's heard of Cyber Patriot? Big up, yeah, it's good stuff, right? It helps teach middle schoolers and high school students and even military academy students about red teaming and blue teaming, and also has competitions, and it's backed by the U.S. Air Force. It's a great program. They're also trying to get into like elementary school, which I think would be really challenging. I personally tried to create a Cyber Patriot team, and if you're thinking of doing one, the idea really is to start to do it, you got to get the parents behind you. Reaching out to the district president, reaching out to the principals, or even the IT teacher. I tried all those different avenues and really didn't get very far. Of course, yeah, this sounds great, we want to do it, but we don't have the funds. No, I'll take care of it. Set up virtual machines, I'll teach it. We just need to make sure there's an educator in the room from the school. Yeah, okay, and nothing happens. Get the teachers behind you, get the parents behind you, and then that will help get teachers to rally with them to bring a Cyber Patriot to your school or your kid's school. Cool program, very cool. Quick case study. So you guys know about Hack for Kids, right? Anybody who doesn't? So I can maybe... Real briefly, Hack for Kids is a charity designed to help solve some of these problems where kids that are curious about technology, cybersecurity, or anything that has to do with tech. We're there to introduce some of these things to them as well as make friends, but also teach them about anti-cyberbullying and safety online. So we do a lot. We also have our first Lego League team. We also have done some other stuff, which I'll talk about in a bit. So that's Hack for Kids. So here's a couple of case studies. So these are really, really good stories. And this is part of the, we do this for a lot of reasons, but this is kind of like when we hear these stories, it makes you feel like, yes, we're really making progress. And I don't want to say this is exactly the reason why we do it, but sometimes, it feels like that. So there's Bob. Bob was 14 when we met him at Circle CityCon about 2 years ago. And Bob came to the room that we were in. We did a village kind of similar to what we did today with BSides Indy. And Bob never, ever knew anything about crypto. Yeah, he knows what the padlock in his browser is supposed to do, but nothing like, what we did today in the CTF. Completely foreign. So he sat down at the table and was like, yeah, I'll give it a shot. That's great. Very open-minded. Bob spent the rest of his day there. We had about 8 or 9 challenges, anything from base 64, monoalphabetic substitution ciphers, just converting binary, like really, really simple things that you can automate with a tool, but Bob did it by hand. And even when we went to lunch and we came back, he was waiting outside the door for us. So that's pretty cool because he discovered something about himself he didn't know he enjoyed, and he was really good at it. Kind of the back end or behind the scenes story is I emailed his father and said, what did Bob tell you about what he did? Oh, yeah, he said he had fun. It was good. He didn't really, like your kids come home from school and you're like, how was school? Yeah, all right. What'd you do? Nothing. It was like one of those kinds of conversations. But I wrote up this email to let Bob's dad know he impressed us beyond what we would have expected anyone that came that day to do. And told him kind of the same stuff I told you. And his dad was like, I had no idea. He didn't mention any of this. So right there at that moment, for a parent to have a revelation or a revelation about what their child's interest in, and the kid just sometimes, I think most kids are like this. They just don't tell their parents certain things that they're interested in for no reason. They just don't. And his dad was like really thrilled. And then after that, he said, we're going to go to Hack for Kids Chicago. Are you guys going to have these challenges? He really wants to do this. And are they going to be the same? I said, no, we're going to have new ones. And we're going to create some just for him. And one of the fun ones that we had was a 3D printed Braille plaque that they had to kind of go through and figure out the Braille. And Orabesh, for any of the Star Wars geeks, you know what Orabesh is? We had some stuff encoded in Orabesh. So that was really cool. He had a great time. So that was Bob. Bob loves crypto. Then there's Alice. And so, this one starts off as a sadder story. So I met Alice in Detroit last year at BSides Detroit. And her parents were in IT, and she was adopted by them. And one of the things about Alice is she was brought into the world, into a home with 2 parents that had chemical addictions, alcohol, drugs, whatever. I don't know the story behind that, but I know it was hard to provide as parents for that kid. So Alice didn't always go to school regularly, didn't have clothes that always fit properly, didn't always eat regularly. So certain things that some kids just expect and take for granted, Alice didn't have. She wasn't getting a proper education. She eventually wound up into the foster care system and then was adopted by, we'll just say, Alice's parents, the IT people. And they went to BSides Detroit because they wanted to go and check it out. And they heard that there was going to be a Hack for Kids. So they brought her. And it's not that Alice was really into tech, but she was starting to show signs of interest. So her parents wanted to see where it would go. Well, one of the things that Alice did, and I would ask them, I'd try to get to know the kids a bit. She never really did anything with like Lego Robotics or Mindstorm or the EV3. And we had this sumo bot competition. So we had about 12 kids there for that event. So she was the second kid to compete. So she built her bot. It wasn't exactly this one. I grabbed that off the internet. But it was kind of had like a wall in front of it. And what they do is the bots have to push each other out of this circle, right? And you push it out, you win. You break pieces off of the other bot, you get points. Well, her bot won all the challenges thereafter. So she got first place in something she's never done before, which was a $25 gift card. So now, mind you, this is someone that had a really rough start in the world. So imagine what winning a $25 gift card meant to her. It's pretty cool, and we're very happy to do it. But then she went on and started to do some of the other challenges that we had in the CTF. She got through all the crypto. Now, one of the things is you might be thinking, how much help did she have from her mom? Well, one of the things that we do is we always tell the parents, if your kids are stuck, ask them a simple question. Do you want time or coaching? And you could do it too. Time or coaching. A lot of the times they'll say, I want some more time. And when they get coaching, it's not give them the answer, it's kind of nudge them, right? You want to be that mama or papa bird that's kind of nudging the baby bird to the edge of the nest, but you don't really want to push them off until they're ready to fly. So she would kind of nudge her in the right direction, and she did really well. All the social engineering questions, not a problem. She figured those out. Lock picks, she did very well. She didn't get them all, but she did very well in that category. And then the badge contest. She was one of the only ones that figured out what the encoded message on the badge was that was scrolling by. So she was doing really well. Well, she did so well, she tied for first place in the CTF. So now, here she is. She's got a $25 gift card and then a pick of the first prize. So she got herself a Kona kit, which, if you know what that is, it's like a little Raspberry Pi starter kit. It's a great thing for somebody who's interested in this stuff to start with, because it has Scratch on there, and you can build a Minecraft server, write Python code. It's a lot of fun. So these are some case studies I wanted to share with you, because it's hard to know about these things unless you hear about it, right? It'd probably be a good write-up on our website, but that's kind of telling you about why we need to have hacking in STEM. Some other case studies, we started in 2014 with 40 kids, and then in 2015 we educated about 115. And then in 2016 we were closer to 240, and this year we're projecting that we're going to be able to educate about 350 kids, including today. So we had about a dozen kids there today. Awesome. Thank you. So I'm going to kind of go a little quicker, but how do you engage the students? Be a mentor. And if you're a kid and you already know something, you could be a mentor too. It doesn't have to just be somebody who's in senior in high school or college grad. Leadership's important, right? We also have to demonstrate leadership within ourselves to show them so they know what good leadership is. Any kind of activities that you can think of, Raspberry Pi, Pi Zeros are pretty cheap. The crypto challenges we have online on our website, so if you're struggling to come up with something fun, you can go to our website and download them. Python, and then we always have a CTF that's online. It's online right now, ctf.hackforkids.com. Anyone can, even the adults, can sign up and have some fun. Every time around an event, we'll then reset it or maybe create some new challenges. I really wanted to spend some time to talk about what we did with a DEF CON 24 scholarship. Unfortunately, kind of running a little short on time. So I just want you guys to know one of the things that we did real briefly is we sent 4 students that were graduating high school to DEF CON. We paid for their airfare, put them in a hotel. We provided some food for them a little bit. And it wasn't without the support of the community. We got money from Mozilla. Some people at Mozilla just gave us $1,000. So we're going to try to do another one. Maybe we'll see. Maybe next year might be better timing. But that's really good stuff. They had a great time. And then they wrote up their experiences, which I'm going to share someday. Challenges, it kind of comes down to the public view of us is not always very positive. We need to keep it positive. Keep doing positive things. It will change. It's becoming cool to be a hacker, but not a cyber criminal. Funding, makerspace, hacking spaces, all this stuff's important. Support them any way you can. Even if you give them $10, you don't know how much that could help. And then even in the rural areas, there's the ruraltechfund.org for people who live really far away from big cities like Indianapolis that want to have this kind of education. This is a great resource. I'm going to skip these challenges just because of time. I think you folks can get it. It's hard to measure the metrics. Very difficult to report on success. I mean, who wants to answer a bunch of surveys, but sometimes we need to know how well we're doing. And can't emphasize this enough. It's everybody. We're all in this together, okay? So participate, do your best to support all these different kinds of activities in order to, make STEM great again. So I will cut to the silliness of Chris Sistrunk, and even added dual core kind of growing there, wearing his DerbyCon hat. Vote for STEM. Make STEM great again, and vote for Dave and Chris in 2016. Thank you, guys. So I try to keep with the time. Do we have time for a couple questions? Okay. One question? Anybody? Take two.
Just lose the room around.
Any questions? All right. Oh, you do?
What are the age requirements, the beginning age requirements for the parents should look forward towards?
So generally speaking, if your child's starting to show some interest in technology, or if you just want to take the initiative to expose them, there are games and activities for them, even as young as 3. And you can maybe push it to 2, depending, again, everybody's development. But there's a game called Robot Turtles. I bought the Kickstarter kit. It's no tech, but it teaches programming and loops and flow control and all that other stuff. And it's a great way for you to spend time with your kid off screens, because it's card-based with a board, and you have to make the silly little sounds of the turtle moving and blowing up ice walls. It's required. So.
What ages do you recommend, for Hack for Kids?
So Hack for Kids, right, which is where I thought the question was going to first go, 7 to 17. Once they're 18, kind of different mentality and state of life where they're at. But 7, we have it going into 3rd grade. Because there's a big difference between someone going into 2nd grade versus 3rd grade from a reading and executive functioning capabilities and their ability to kind of sit there and focus. Thanks for clarifying that. Did you have any other questions in there? Okay. Anyone else? Yes, sir. That was a part of usually what I mentioned in the presentation, and I kind of skipped it. One of the things I was going to mention was Roots, which, again, part of my Roots Asylum was part of the inspiration. They're very Las Vegas focused, right? People go there to bring their kids to all the activities. We want to do something different where Hack for Kids goes to the kids, and that's what we've been doing. We piloted it in Chicago, and we've been going to Indianapolis. We're doing Indianapolis twice this year. We even have an event in Belgium, Ghent, Belgium, 2 years in a row. So yes, that's a part of it. As far as we can go, the planet is our venue. Anyone else? All right, cool. Thanks, you guys. You were awesome. Make STEM great again. USB.
I had the opportunity to go with Ms. Bath this year, and we did a crypto workshop for Dave.
Yeah, it was cool.
Michigan.
Yep.
That was a lot of fun.
Very cool.
Dave got these custom triangles.
Yeah, they're like crayons that weren't round, but they're like triangles.
Yeah.
You guys' names are on them.
Yeah.
And I still got like 100 at home. I should have brought them.
A lot of fun.
Yeah, it was great.
Coloring books and the Cryptologic Museum, and it was a lot of fun. So yeah, I would say if you have skills that you can bring to bear on things that will educate the next generation, please do. Real quick, I'd just like to thank again Lickety. Thank you for doing the network today. Village, our volunteers, our sponsors. Very special thank you to Reed Whiteman. Again, couldn't have done it without him. Thank you to Tim for taking pictures. Circle City Con, cool hoodies. Thank you, Circle City Con. That's where this came from. BSides Las Vegas. Thank you so much for the generous donation today. Chester and Chris for the IoT Village. Who else?
stickers. If you don't know Jedi Day, that's Tim. He does the stickering. He's at every conference now with these cool little smaller stickers. They always have something fun and interesting on them. And Tim DeBlock for taking photographs and speaking. I think that's everyone.
Our
The staff for all our hard work. Our speakers, our volunteers.
Well, our attendees.
Our attendees. Love you all. See you next year. Thank you. So much. Thank you.
Hey, real quick, I got a ton of Keybase invites. So any of you folks who don't have Keybase, the wait list is like 8,000 people right now. I have enough for everybody. Tweet me,
like 200,
tweet me with, just tweet to me at Ms. Bat, just tweet me the message, BatCat, and I'll DM you an invite, okay?
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Bat.
See you next year. Hey! Hey, Carter. Love you guys.
Yeah. So we got the, so I was able to do the hoodie.
So what happened was $700 donation.
So Project Lead the Way, I did it when I was in high school. It's like a high school thing, but it actually counts as towards a dual credit, and it's entirely STEM focused. So you take an intro to engineering course, and then what I ended up doing is I took a digital electronics, so it's all breadboarding, PLD boards, stuff like that. But it sounds like you could easily